Welcome, dear listener. Tonight we step gently back to the year 1325, a time of plagues, peculiar punishments, and endless pottage. Cast aside the sweeping castles and shining knights, life in a medieval peasant's hut was far humbler and far less comfortable than Hollywood would have you believe. Imagine yourself as a 22-year-old peasant, eyes fluttering open to dawn's pale light. Your bed is not a cloud of memory foam, but a half-rotted straw mattress once the barn floor. 3 months passed. Beneath a wool blanket heavy with last winter's grime, you lie surrounded by the soft crunch of cockchafers and the restless stir of fleas. No pillows, no Egyptian cotton, just the steady, unrelenting weight of damp hay dot in the distance. The church bell clangs a shrill alarm clock with no snooze button. You rise, joints crackling like ancient boards, and discover your one-room wooden hut. No windows, no curtains. An open-plan family suite shared with your parents, a couple of goats, a brood of chickens, and every insect the countryside could muster. The air is a curious bouquet of stale beer, goat, human sweat and, perhaps, mold, though you dare not investigate. You brave your first stretch, only to curse the cold that has crept in through the thatched roof. Your bare feet meet either puddles of last night's rain or an unfortunate deposit from the neighbor's hen, turning your floor into a living ecosystem. You steady yourself on the edge of the straw bed, fully aware that privacy is a myth. 8 of your closest relatives and half of the barnyard crew are wide awake with you, but the day has barely begun. Before you can even consider your aching back, nature summons you, and it does so quite insistently. There is no porcelain throne, no flushing mechanism, no scraps of soft paper. Just a wooden bucket behind the hut, likely already half-filled by Uncle Wolfstan's turnip-fueled indigestion. You hold your breath, squat carefully, and when nature has run its course, lean out the window and call God, Old French for watch out below. Below lies the village street, a gentle river of barley mash, animal droppings, and yesterday's chamber pot contents. If you're fortunate enough to venture to the public latrine, you'll sit shoulder to with strangers on a plank bench, breathing fumes that would trigger modern gag reflexes. Toilet paper, never heard of it. Your choices: straw, leaves, moss, a scrap of cloth, or simply wiping and hoping for the best. And so, dear listener, that is how your morning begins in medieval Europe. Fleas, cramped quarters, and rudimentary plumbing, all before the sun has fully risen. The promise of breakfast, if you can call it that, waits around the corner. But first, a moment to let these images settle. What does the rest of your day hold? Perhaps we'll find out next, as we crawl from the chamber pot back to the hearth. If your courage holds, with the harsh business of relieving yourself behind you, assuming you survived without a tumble into filth, you creep back through the straw-strewn hut toward the hearth. Here begins the next phase of your medieval ordeal. Sustenance, or the rough approximation thereof. A grim breakfast by fire. The hearth is little more than a shallow pit lined with stones. In it, a thin flame flickers beneath a soup cauldron. You approach on bare toes, skin prickling with cold, and lift the cauldron's lid with a small wooden stick. Up wafts a pallid steam that smells faintly of last night's barley mash and something unidentifiable, perhaps boiled turnip scraps or the remnants of an overcooked leek. You ladle out a portion into a chipped wooden bowl. Pottage, the ubiquitous medieval stew that likely began simmering days ago. Under the surface, globs of grayish grains float alongside mushy carrots or swede, while a few stray beans bob in a tepid sea of broth. You take a cautious sip. The flavor is, how to say, monotonous, an undifferentiated earthiness, held together by salt so coarse that you can taste the granules scratching your tongue. Beside the bowl rests the traditional accompaniment, a slab of hard rye bread. It's not really a loaf you can slice, no. It's a compacted brick studded with bits of sawdust or ground acorns, depending on your lord's generosity. It crunches ominously when you bite down. You chew sparingly, mindful that if it fractures a tooth, there's no healer in a 100-mile radius qualified to fix it. Finally, you need a drink. The idea of fresh water is laughable. Straight from the well or river, it likely harbors parasites, bacteria, and perhaps a cow carcass gone awry upstream. So you reach for your wooden mug filled with small beer, weak ale barely above piddle strength, brewed to kill the worst microbes, yet mild enough that children drink it at dawn. It smells yeasty, tastes faintly sour, and warms your belly more than it warms your hands. As you swallow, you glance around the hut. By now, your parents and siblings have also assembled at the hearth. The family goat noses at a spilled drop of pottage on the floor, and a scrawny hen hops onto a low bench to peck at stray crumbs. A younger cousin licks the rim of his wooden cup, oblivious to manners. There is no conversation, only the soft clinking of wooden spoon on bowl, a single cough from Uncle Wolfstan, and the crackle of damp logs. Dressing for another day of toil. Breakfast concluded, you turn to the matter of clothing. You own precisely one tunic, woven from undyed wool and patched so often that it resembles a quilt more than a garment. You shake it free of loose straw and slip it on over your linen shift, pulling the rough fabric across your shoulders. The tunic smells faintly of sheep and old smoke. Next come your hose, stocking like leg coverings. One has been darned so many times that its color varies from thread to thread. The other bears a hole at the knee, revealing a swirl of dried earth against your skin. Your shoes, if you can call them that, are simple leather stitched crudely with sinew, offering as much protection as a layer of parchment. You tie the leather thongs uneasily around your ankles, careful not to twist them too tight and draw blood. As you dress, you catch your reflection in a small polished metal plate hung on the wall. Your hair, dark and unwashed since Easter, sticks out in odd tufts. You brush a hand through it, dust rises like tiny clouds. Your face, lean from hours of labor, is pocked with faint pox scars and several angry insect bite welts. Still, you stand a little taller. A fresh tunic day is a hopeful day behind you. Your mother emerges from a low alcove draped with tattered cloth. She fastens a linen coif over her gray-streaked hair and tosses you a small leather belt. This, she says, is for carrying your only tool, a sturdy wooden hoe head bound with rawhide to a splintery shaft. Unlaced from its corner hook, it already looks heavier than yesterday, an itch that never ends fully dressed. You venture about a half step before pausing to itch your side. The welts from yesterday's fleas and lice have blended into a single, maddening mosaic. You scrape at them absently with a rough-edged spoon handle, raising a tiny cloud of skin flakes. Across the room, your younger sister does the same, rubbing her arms with a piece of coarse cloth. No one mentions it. Bites are as routine as breakfast. It's part of your uniform in this barnyard lifestyle. You swallow a sigh and move on. Today's work does not wait for comfort. Heading outside, the first glimpse of sunrise, you step out the door into pale dawn light. The ground is still damp and muddy, slick with thawed snow and last night's rain. The thatched roof overhead drips intermittently, each drop a tiny percussion against your simple wool cloak. Ahead lies the communal field where you and the other peasants labor for someone else's profit. The manor's furrow stretches out like a green-gray ribbon into the fields beyond. A single ox team stands waiting, its large beasts lowing softly in the cool air. You lift your trusty hoe and heft it over your shoulder. Nearby, another peasant, perhaps a dozen years elder to you, tightens her grip on a sickle and nods a silent greeting of solidarity. Beyond her, a handful of villagers are already bent to the day, pulling stubborn weeds or leveling furrows. In the stillness before the work begins, you listen to the village-awakened distant crow of a rooster, the low murmur of hawthorn bushes as birds settle in dawn, the church bell, a thin reminder of obligations yet to come. And as you set foot into the field's first row of furrows, you wonder, with the dawn's first light just peeking over the horizon, you settle into the monotonous rhythm of peasant labor. Your wooden hoe slices into the cold earth, sending clods tumbling into neat rows. Each stroke is measured dig lift, cast a motion repeated thousands of times across seasons. The air remains crisp, each breath a visible puff that mingles with the faint steam rising from the field's moist soil. By mid-morning, the sun has climbed high enough to chase away the frost, but not yet softened the air's bite. Sweat soon beads on your brow, despite the chill. You pause to wipe your forehead with a sleeve only to discover a fresh army of lice crawling along the seam. You brush them off with one hand, clutching the hoe with the other, and force yourself to carry on. The only sounds are the quiet rasp of tool on earth, the occasional grunt from a neighbor, and the distant crow of cocks from half a mile away. Toward midday, you reach for your small leather pouch of dried turnip slices and hazelnuts, a meager ration from yesterday's bake. You break off a piece of hard bread and nibble sparingly, chewing slowly to conserve your limited supply. Each bit tastes more like obligation than nourishment. You wash it down with another swig of small beer, grimacing at the sour aftertaste but relieved that it carries fewer worms than yesterday's attempt might have. Around you, the field becomes a vast patchwork of hunched figures. Some push ox-drawn plows along the furrows. Others pry out stubborn weeds. A group of children no older than 7 or 8 trudge along the margin, armed with tiny wooden rakes, mimicking their parents. Their bright linen shifts billow in the breeze, a brief whisper of color against the drab brown earth. By early afternoon, the sun's heat is relentless. The thatched roofs of the nearby huts radiate warmth, and the stink of damp wool and sweat intensifies. You pause beneath a lone hawthorn tree, leaning your hoe against its trunk. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the breeze cool your flushed face. A single bird trills overhead, and for a heartbeat you almost forget where you are. Then you remember, there is no rest until sundown. No respite beyond a meager meal of pottage, and the unending demands of your lord's fields. With a sigh, you lift your hoe and trudge back into the rows. A sudden storm and shared shelter by mid-afternoon. Clouds gather with alarming speed. The air shifts from stifling warmth to a damp heaviness. An elder peasant at the field's edge points skyward, muttering a prayer. You glance up to see dark gray banks roiling together before you can scramble for cover. Fat raindrops begin to fall, first sparingly, then turning into a drumming torrent. Tools are dropped and peasants run toward the nearest shelter, low-roofed barn where yesterday's hay lies still damp but at least under cover. You scramble in after them, joining a crowd of damp shapes shivering in the gloom. Inside, the barn's thick beams groan under the weight of rainwater seeping through the thatch. Hens cluck nervously in the rafters, and the goats bray anxiously. You huddle close to the hearth, a small brazier where some kind soul has managed to kindle a fire from damp kindling. Its smoke curls around the beams, mixing with the scent of hay and wet wool. Here, you share whispers and quick barley cake bites with your fellow laborers. A young man from the next village recounts how his father nearly broke his arm yesterday hauling a fallen branch. A woman tucks her child under her cloak, her head bent to warm the little one's tears. There is camaraderie in this forced pause, a brief reminder that, despite the grind, you are not entirely alone. The rain falls for nearly an hour. Each minute, a drumbeat of both relief and dread. Shelter delays the inevitable return to work, but when the storm passes, the fields will be more treacherous than before, slick with mud and prone to flooding. Back to the miry. Eventually, the rain ceases. You step back into the field, where water has pooled in shallow depressions. Your boots, if you can still call them that, suck at the clay, reluctant to let go with each stride. You sink ankle-deep in muck, and your tunic hem is smeared with earth. In the newly softened ground, your hoe cuts more easily, but each swing brings up heavy globs of wet soil that cling to the blade and must be hacked away. The weeds pop up with renewed vigor, and the furrows have narrowed from slumping sides. What once took 10 strokes now takes 15. Tiredness wells in your shoulders, but you refuse to quit until every row is turned. You keep your back straight, leaning into each motion, counting in your head to maintain pace. 1, 2, 3. As exhaustion builds, your vision blurs at the edges, and your mind drifts to fantasies of a softer life, a day off, a warm bath, a loaf of clean white bread. But you shake the thoughts away. They are luxuries forbidden to peasants. The day drags on. The sun flits behind ragged gray clouds, and the wind picks up, rustling your tunic. A distant thunderclap reminds you that more storms may be coming. You press on, knowing that if you stop, the unfinished field will cost your family fines or extra days of labor. Dusk, and the days end finally, as the sky turns a weary shade of charcoal. The Lord's horn sounds. A low, mournful blast carried across the waterlogged fields. It signals work's end, and you release your hoe with a final sigh of relief. Peasants gather their tools and trudge back toward the huts, and aching your boots squish along the muddy path, and every joint in your body protests. A neighbor slaps his own leg and grins crookedly, echoing your exhausted sense of triumph at having survived yet another day. Reaching your hut, you step through the door into the warm glow of the hearth. Your family has already begun preparing evening pottage, a fresh batch, this time flavored with a handful of dried peas and a few scraps of salted pork if the Lord was feeling generous. You settle on the edge of the straw mattress you're thrown for the evening, and eat while leaning a hoe against the wall to dry. Around you, the hut is alive with quiet chatter. Your mother fussing over the fire, your younger sister singing a soft folk tune, your father checking tomorrow's weather forecast from an old almanac if he can read. A stray chicken wanders and pecks at a dropped piece of bread, and darts out again. Your bones ache, your blistered hands throb, and your stomach rumbles with a hunger that no warmth can quite soothe. Yet as you sip your small beer and listen to the flicker of straw embers in the hearth, a deep, simple contentment settles in your chest. You have survived. You have worked, you have eaten, and you will wake tomorrow to do it all again. Reflection. The quiet bravery of ordinary lives in the modern world. We imagine bravery as grand acts, charging into battle, sailing uncharted seas, or scaling mountains. Yet here, in the muddy fields of 1325, bravery is measured in each stroke of the hoe, each step across the flooded furrow, each shed loaf of coarse bread. Your day, though unremarkable to medieval nobility, is a testament to resilience, enduring fleas and lice, storms and hunger, the endless cycle of labor and rest. It is a narrative of survival that pulses through every ordinary life, a hidden backbone of history often overlooked by sweeping epics. As you drift towards sleep under a dank wool blanket, consider this: the quiet courage it takes to face each tomorrow might be history's most persistent and unsung story, one woven not in gilded halls, but in the sweat and solidarity of countless peasants like you. With that, dear listener, we close the chapter on morning in 1325. May the steady rhythm of plowing, raindrops on thatch, and crackle of hearth embers guide you gently into rest. From clay tokens to promissory notes in the bustling marketplaces of 10th century Chengdu, a quiet revolution was underway, one that would change the way the world understood money forever. Picture narrow streets paved with stone slabs, lined with wooden stalls draped in silk canopies. Merchants haggle over sacks of rice and rolls of silk, their voices mingling with the clatter of bamboo scales and the clip-clop of horse carts. Each transaction involves exchanging heavy bronze coins, stamped with square holes and jingling in leather pouches at everyone's waist. Yet these coins are cumbersome. A wealthy merchant transporting taxes owed to the state must haul crates of metal hundreds of pounds in copper and bronze. Bandits lurk along mountain passes, eager to seize a chest of coins. Riverboats overloaded with cash are targets for pirates. In this world, the ancient Chinese proverb "money is heavy" has become a solemn warning. Around AD 1024, Sichuan's tea and salt office faced a dilemma. how to move tax revenue efficiently across vast distances. Their solution was deceptively simple: issue paper certificates, floating money approved by the government. Initially, these were nothing more than handwritten promissory notes, exchanged for a deposit of bronze coins. A merchant could present the note in distant Chengdu and receive the equivalent metal value without hauling physical coins. The first notes were crude: sheets of mulberry bark inscribed with official seals, cumbersome servants carrying them in bamboo tubes. But soon, local private firms POHO emerged, each with their own distinctive style. One house might use blue-tinted bamboo paper, another pressed papyrus with ornate red stamps. The notes bore serial numbers and elaborate calligraphy, detailing the issuer's name, the date, and the promised amount in strings of cash. At first, skepticism reigned. A buyer at the marketplace might demand you prove your papers, worth show me the coins behind your paper. Others worried about forgery. What if someone carved a new seal? But as POHO built reputations over decades, always redeeming notes for metal, even during famines and floods, trust grew. Merchants learned they could travel from Chengdu to Kaifeng carrying a small stack of paper rather than a chest of metal, and conduct thousands of strings worth of trade with ease. These early notes were not yet government-backed currency in the modern sense. They were private bills of exchange, yet they sowed the seeds for a broader experiment. In 1120, the Song imperial court began issuing official Jahazi notes, printed in bulk using woodblock techniques and backed by government reserves. This represented a monumental shift, the state declaring, "On paper, we promise this note is good for one string of bronze cash." By mid-Song times, palaces and bazaars alike buzzed with talk of paper money. Even officials in distant border towns accepted it, provided they could redeem it at provincial treasuries. The convenience was undeniable. Generals on campaign could pay soldiers without lugging coins. Merchants could finance far-flung trade routes to Central Asia. Civil servants could remit taxes up the chain faster than ever before. Still, challenges remained. Counterfeiters adapted, carving wooden stamps, and mixing lighter fibers into homemade paper. Frogs in wet cellars would sometimes warp a stack of notes beyond recognition, and the value of Jawazi fluctuated with government printing when too many notes flooded the system. Each note's purchasing power sank, leading to mild inflation. As dusk fell over Chengdu's canals, you might see boatmen counting neat bundles of paper beneath lantern light, while street vendors accepted a mix of coins and notes for bowls of wheat noodles. The clink of metal had begun to yield to the rustle of paper, an almost inaudible shift that would ripple outward, foreshadowing the paper currencies of later dynasties and far-flung lands. And yet by the end of this first era, one question lingered: how would Song officials balance the convenience of printing with the peril of overissuance? And could such a fragile paper-based promise endure in a world ruled so long by metal? Government backing, expansion, and emerging challenges. When the Song court first dipped its toes into paper money, it did so with caution. The private POHO houses had spent decades earning public trust, yet for the imperial government, adopting Jawazi meant wagering both its credit and the stability of the realm's economy. In 1120, Emperor Heisong issued the first official Jawazi in Jinsu Prefecture, in modern-day Sit. These notes, uniform in size and bearing the red cherry seal of the Ministry of Revenue, promised redemption at any government treasury for one string of bronze cash, roughly 1,000 coins. Standardization and distribution to prevent forgery and confusion. The government standardized the design. Each Jawazi featured the emperor's reign title, the issuing officer's name, and a block-printed illustration of mythical Qilin symbols of prosperity and honesty. Official paper was specially manufactured, from high-quality mulberry fibers pressed through cloth screens and seasoned with ultraviolet-resistant dyes. Each sheet underwent drying in high-ceilinged chambers, flanked by guards to ensure no unsanctioned copies slipped out. Distribution began along major trade arteries: Chengdu, Kaifeng the capital, Hangzhou and Guangzhou of provincial treasuries stocked printed notes alongside hefty stashes of bronze. Local magistrates encouraged merchants and commoners alike to deposit their coins in exchange for Jawazi, issuing handwritten exchanges receipts until printed notes arrived. By mid-century, travelers could journey from the Yangtze Basin to the South China Sea carrying dozens of Jawazi easily traded for goods, services, or new notes. No more barges groaning under metal. Economic integration and everyday use paper money soon infiltrated daily life. In Kaifeng's bustling food markets, noodle vendors accepted Jahazi alongside small change. Fishermen in Guangdong paid harbor fees with bundles of notes. Even Buddhist monasteries collected donations in paper form, using them to purchase rice and firewood. Schoolmasters in provincial towns admitted students in return for Jahazi that funded classroom supplies. Yet this integration required logistical support. Couriers carried sealed bamboo tubes of Jawazi between provincial vaults under military escort. Low-level clerks tallied incoming notes in ledgers with precision, using cinnabar reed ink to record serial numbers. Once a month, local treasury officers reported note redemption rates up the chain to the ministry in Kaifeng. Any discrepancy, even a handful of missing notes, triggered immediate investigation, lest thieves, forgers, or corrupt officials illicitly enrich themselves. The perils of overissuance. By mid-12th century, however, the lure of icily printed revenue proved irresistible. War with the Qing Dynasty strained song finances, and each new campaign required funding. The court authorized successive jiaozi releases without proportionate increases in metal reserves. With too many notes chasing too few goods, prices began a gradual climb. A bushel of rice that cost 1 string of cash in 1120 now fetched nearly 2 strings of jiaozi by 1160. Commoners noticed the change. A boatman in the Grand Canal complained that the paper in his pouch felt lighter each week. A merchant in Yangzhou grumbled that his jiaozi lost half its worth between issuance and delivery. Farmers, paid in notes, balked at exchanging them for seed and plows that demanded more jiaozi than they earned. Barter re-emerged in remote counties, and some shopkeepers refused old jiaozi altogether, demanding fresh printed issues with greater face value. Governmental reforms and public edicts. Alarmed by the creeping inflation, song ministers debated remedies. The Minister of Revenue proposed stringent limits on new note printing, capping annual issuance to a fixed percentage of outstanding metal reserves. In 1173, an edict ordered the melting down of underused jiaozi, exchanging them for bronze at a reduced rate. Local precincts burned notes gathered in exchange, a symbolic gesture to reinforce faith in the currency's scarcity to curb counterfeiting. The court introduced watermarks, subtle images of dragons and lotus blossoms embedded in the papers. Some treasuries applied thermochromic inks, the earliest known use of color-changing pigments, so that notes briefly blushed when warmed by the touch. Merchants were instructed to fold jiaozi along precise creases. Authorized folds formed a tiger stripe pattern in which any alteration to the fold produced telltale tears. These technical measures, combined with heavier penalties for counterfeiters, public floggings, and exile, slowed but did not entirely halt forgery rings. Wartime strain and regional divergence. While Kaifeng's treasury maintained relative stability, frontier regions faced different pressures. In the southwest, heavy monsoon rains disrupted crop yields, reducing tax income and metal deposits. Local officials, unable to ship coins at Priva, printed emergency provincial notes Minsheng Qian backed by rice silos rather than copper. These notes co-circulated with imperial jiaozi, creating a patchwork of currencies whose exchange rates fluctuated unpredictably with harvest yields. Meanwhile, after the fall of Kaifeng in 1127 during the Ginkang incident, the Southern Song court re-established itself at Lin in modern Hangzhou. The new capital relied heavily on southern trade. Salt, tea, porcelain, all financed through paper transactions. The treasury of the salt monopoly printed specialized notes redeemable at salt warehouses. Merchants used these to settle imperial dues without touching copper. Over time, the southern provinces developed their own financial network. Silk Road caravans and maritime traders increasingly priced goods in Hongzhou jiaozi, reflecting regional trust in southern note stability. Social impacts and criticisms. To many scholars and monks, paper money seemed unnatural, devoid of the tangible weight they associated with real value. Confucian moralists argued that the state's meddling in currency adulterated social harmony. A famous poem from 1184 lamented money that floats like clouds, debts that vanish in the wind, urging a return to metallic coins. Yet for the average artisan or fisherman, the convenience of paper no longer lugging 10 pounds of coin for a week's earnings offered undeniable relief. Women merchants in market towns even saw paper currency as empowering. A widowed tea seller in Guilin began accepting jiaozi in exchange for fine green tea, amassing enough notes to fund her daughter's marriages. Guild records from Chuanzhou revealed women collectively pooling jiaozi to invest in cotton, dyeing equipment, an early example of communal credit. These quiet innovations underscore how paper money altered not only commerce but social relations, shifting power subtly toward those who mastered its circulation. And so, the Song dynasty's paper currency system stands at a crossroads. Having vastly increased the speed and scope of trade, it now wrestles with inflationary pressures, regional imbalances, and philosophical skepticism. How would the Southern Song court adapt its monetary policy to balance the necessities of war and administration against the perils of runaway inflation? Resolution, legacy, and lessons. By the late 12th century, Song officials had learned hard lessons about the double-edged power of paper money. They faced 3 intertwined challenges: reining in inflation, reconciling regional variance, and restoring public confidence. Their solutions, though imperfect, shaped not only China's economy but the very idea of fiat currency worldwide. Austerity measures and controlled issuance. In 1195, the Grand Council convened an emergency session in Linen, the southern Song capital. Dressed in midnight blue robes trimmed with silver thread symbols of their solemn duty, ministers debated vigorous new constraints. At the heart of the plan lay a strict issuance cap, total jiaozi circulation, would never exceed 50% of annual tax receipts in bronze, effectively tying paper printing to metal reserves once more. Any surplus jawazi would be retired and ceremonially burned in public bonfires, their ashes scattered at the West Lake's edge as an omen of renewal. Implementation required meticulous record-keeping. Treasury clerks, guided now by standardized handbooks, stamped daily tallies into tally ledgers bound with red silk cords. Provincial treasuries submitted monthly reports to Linen via sealed courier pouches, each containing both jawazi surrendered for retirement and certificates acknowledging their destruction. Inspectors traveled the realm, cross-checking local annals with palace records. Discrepancies triggered formal inquiries and, in severe cases, punitive demotions for negligent magistrates. These austerity measures steadily slowed inflation. By 1205, a bushel of rice that once cost 2 strings of jawazi reverted to roughly 1.3 strings, still above the original parity but significantly improved. More importantly, merchants and commoners observed the government's discipline, and confidence in jawazi rebounded. Harmonizing regional currencies despite centralized caps, regional differences persisted, especially in the southwest, where Minshang provincial notes backed by rice still circulated alongside imperial jaozi. To bridge these divergent systems, the court introduced exchange offices in major cities. Official rates were posted on palace walls, for instance, 3 Minshang equal to imperial jaozi in a good harvest year, reverting to parity when tax inflows flagged. Exchange offices employed standardized scales, small bronze counterweights, and lacquered wooden boards etched with rate tables to ensure transparent transactions. Provincial notes surrendered at these offices were shipped to Linen, where they funded grain distributions during famine, thus ensuring that even local currencies played a role in national relief efforts. Over decades, these practices partially unified southern and western monetary realms, allowing merchants to travel seamlessly from Chengdu to Guangzhou on a single paper portfolio. New security features and anti-counterfeit innovations. Counterfeiting, though diminished, never vanished. By 1210, the Song court introduced multicolor woodblock printing, requiring artisans to layer 3 separate prints, each in black, red, and indigo. Any misalignment immediately betrayed a forgery. Additionally, notes incorporated embedded fibers treated with plant-based phosphors that glowed faintly under moonlight, a rudimentary security marking. Municipal lamplit squares occasionally held not inspections, where townspeople gathered to authenticate their jawazi against known genuine samples. For especially high-valued notes, the government issued gold-edged jawazi sheets with a thin border of genuine gold leaf. These circulated mainly among wealthy merchants and large estate owners, creating a small elite class of paper aristocrats whose holdings in gold-edged notes symbolized both prestige and trust. Crisis and the fortitude of paper money. The early 13th century brought renewed military pressure from the Mongols. Massive tribute payments and mercenary salaries strained the treasury. In 1234, the court again resorted to emergency printing, but this time did so transparently. New notes bore special earmarks and a pledge to retire 3/4 of existing jawazi by the following harvest, accompanied by public proclamations and ritual retirements. This measured expansion staved off hyperinflation. Indeed, when the Song finally succumbed to Mongol conquest in 1276, paper currency remained nominally intact. The Yuan dynasty that followed immediately confiscated existing jaozi, replacing them with its own chow notes. Yet the transition hinged on shared confidence in the concept, without centuries of paper money practice. The Yuan experiment might have failed far more spectacularly. Social and cultural impacts beyond technical fixes and monetary theory. Paper currency reshaped everyday life. Merchants once bound a heavy copper coin began to think in abstract units. I need 3 bundles of jawazi for this shipment, rather than 300 bronze coins. Contracts, wills, and dowries were drafted on paper with spaces reserved for drawings of official seals and elaborate cursive signatures, precursors to modern financial instruments. Women's cooperative banks, established in several port cities by mid-13th century, used jaozi to pool savings and fund small-scale textile ventures. Local guild records from Tronsho show tailors and dyers depositing paper earnings to finance communal dye vats and shared looms, an early form of microfinance that blurred lines between commerce and community welfare. Monasteries and scholars, once skeptical of floating money, adapted to. By the mid-Song era, renowned academies in Hangzhou stocked guazi to commission scholarly works, sponsoring the printing of Confucian and Buddhist texts. Libraries housed both fragile bamboo strips and stacks of paper currency, side by side, as a testament to the era's transformative convergence of knowledge and commerce. Lessons for the modern world as you drift toward rest. Imagine the lessons embedded in these ancient notes. Trust is earned. Without decades of consistent redemption, paper money fails. The Song journey shows why central banks today painstakingly build credibility through transparent policy and reserve backing. Balance flexibility and restraint. Emergency expansions may provide short-term relief, but only disciplined retirement prevents runaway inflation. Modern monetary authorities echo this centuries-old balance. Innovation requires vigilance. From watermarks to multicolor printing, each security step prefigures today's digital anti-fraud measures. The song experiment reminds us that every advance invites a new wave of counterfeiters and a new wave of safeguards, social ripples. Currency is more than an economic tool. It affects social structures, gender roles, and cultural production. The spread of jiaozi empowered not just merchants but communal ventures, education, and even religious institutions. The Qing Dynasty's paper money revolution was not a simple triumph, it was a series of experiments, missteps, corrections, and innovations woven into the fabric of everyday life. By embracing both the promise and the peril of money that floats, they charted a course that echoes across centuries into our modern financial systems. And now, gentle listener, consider this. In an age of digital wallets and crypto, are we not still navigating the same age-old challenges of trust, scarcity, and innovation that the Song emperors faced? With that reflection, our tale of the slow rise of paper currency in Song China comes to rest. Desert caravans and the birth of trans-Saharan commerce. Imagine standing on the sun-baked sands of the central Sahara around 8800. The sky shimmers in relentless blue, and the earth beneath your feet is a mosaic of ochre dunes and cracked clay pans. In the distance, a wavering mirage resolves into a procession of camels. Each beast, stoic and sure-footed, carries heavy packs levisad, bulging with dust, salt bars, and lengths of fine cloth. The caravan leads toward the fabled forests of the south, where gold glitters and river sands more brightly than the desert sun, origins of a golden route for centuries. Local West African kingdoms traded salt, kola nuts, and kola wood with neighboring peoples, but by the early 9th century, a more ambitious network formed, the trans-Saharan gold salt trade. Across hundreds of miles of unrelenting desert, Berber merchants from the Maghreb adept in dune navigation, linked with sunning traders in the Sahel. Their meeting point was the ancient city of Sijila Masa in today's southeastern Morocco and southern outposts like Tagaza, the Salt Mountain, where the richest salt deposits lay. Beneath shifting sands, salt was more precious than gold to inland farmers, essential for preserving meat and maintaining health in the sweltering heat. In return for salt and hefty uniform bars stamped by caravans, southern merchants offered gold dust gathered from rivers like the Niger and Senegal. These exchanges were far from haphazard. They followed seasonal rhythms. Caravans departed north after the Sahel's short rains around October, arriving near Sijil Masa by January. Their packs then reversed salt for gold and they returned south before the Tuareg summer storms peaked in June. Organization and logistics. Caravans varied in size. A modest one might number 50 camels and a dozen merchants. The grandest could exceed 800 animals and hundreds of men. Each camel carried roughly 300-pound salt bars or bales of kola nuts balanced against elegantly tied leather pouches of gold dust. Merchants rode in pairs. A local Berber guide with intimate knowledge of water wells, often spaced 30 to 40 miles apart, paired with a West African trader skilled in southern river routes to ensure safe passage. Caravans followed established GUM's military escort routes. These escorts, sometimes recruited from local desert clans, charged tolls to protect against bandits. Troops by day scouted ahead. By night, they formed watch circles, fires burning low to discourage ambush. At each well, merchants prepared a communal ritual. Barrels of fresh water were shared and purified with trace amounts of salt dust, believed to ward off sand spirits and ensure safe passage. Goods beyond gold and salt. Though salt and gold formed the backbone, caravans carried a variety of goods: kola nuts, bitter, caffeinated seeds prized in West African courts and mosques as stimulants for long prayers, ivory tusks, harvested from forest elephants, traded southwards for bronze tools, textiles, cotton cloths dyed indigo or woven in fine patterns, brought north as luxury fabric. Copper ingots, mined in the Niger Bend, valued in the Maghreb for coinage and decoration. Each item left a trace: shards of indigo dye on Moroccan pottery, bits of ivory carved into Berber jewelry, copper bracelets found in Mali's royal tombs. These goods fostered not just commerce but cultural exchange. Architectural techniques, language, loanwords, and shared musical rhythms all flowed along. The caravan tracks. The rise of Ghana Empire. By the 10th century, a powerful West African state emerged in what is now southeastern Mauritania and western Mali. The Ghana Empire Ouagadougou, its rulers known as the Ghana or war chief, controlled key southern endpoints of the gold trade, the towns of Kumbi-Sela and Odegast. From fortified hilltops, Ghana levied taxes on every ounce of gold passing through, amassing wealth that financed royal palaces of timber and clay, staffed by a standing army of swordsmen wearing iron chain mail. Portuguese chroniclers, centuries later, described Ghana's glittering court, ambassadors draped in dyed silks, bronze drums booming in ceremonial halls, and heaps of gold nuggets piled high enough, they claimed, to sink ships if cast into the sea. While these accounts might exaggerate, archaeological digs at Kumbi Slag reveal elite residences and imported ceramics from the magnificence of the empire's far-reaching connections. Unresolved question despite its power. Little is known about the everyday lives of caravan drivers, desert guides, and local villagers who sustained this trade. How did they negotiate relationships of trust across vast distances and cultural divides? And when shifting sands eventually obscured old wells, what happened to the knowledge of safe passage? Did entire routes vanish, only to be rediscovered generations later? As your caravan pauses for the night in the desert's hush, camels kneel in a semicircle before the blazing fire. Merchants exchange quiet greetings, and the only sounds are shifting sands and distant stars. You sip reconstituted millet porridge, pondering the fragile threads that tied distant empires together in gold and salt. From desert arrival to inland hubs before dawn's first light, you stir beneath a coarse wool blanket in Ordigistan adobe, outpost perched on a sandstone ridge marking the southern edge of the Sahara. The horizon glows faintly, and you join dozens of fellow caravan merchants around a communal brazier. Freshly baked millet flatbreads steam on a low table, and goat's milk porridge bubbles in iron bowls. The air, though cooler than the midday desert blast, still carries a powdery haze of sand from the prior day's journey. Ottogest, though modest compared to the sprawling markets of the Maghreb, functions as a vital relay. Caravans from the north unload their salt bars, ivory, and copper for temporary storage in carved rock cellars, while teams of sunning middlemen prepare to transport gold dust southward. In narrow alleys lined with domed storage vaults, you see clay jars stamped with both Berber script and Arabic calligraphy, marking ownership and weight capacity. Once paperwork, handwritten receipts sealed with red waxes exchanged. Camels rebind their loads, swapping salt for gold pouches carefully measured in goldsmith's scales. Local guides, wearing leather turbans and long indigo robes, led black ox-drawn carts northward toward the Niger River, while you and your fellow desert traders follow a separate route along wadis and fissured plateaus, toward Kumbi Sela, pulse of Sahelian towns. After 2 days on rocky tracks, you reach Dor, an emerging Sahelian village of sun-bleached clay houses and palm-thatched granaries. Here the air is thick with chatter, in Sanink Pula and Tamashek as farmers, herders and craftsmen converge. A bustling market has formed beneath acacia groves. Women in dyed cotton wrappers hawk shea butter and black-eyed peas. Men in woolen caps demonstrate ironworking techniques. Children dart between stalls, clutching handfuls of groundnuts. You deposit a handful of gold flakes, each dust mote glinting like a star in the central weighing pavilion, where 2 bent elders measure and certify it according to the sand balance method adapted from ancient Greek scales. A bright blue powder is sprinkled across the beam. If the gold settles cleanly into the trough, the measurement is trusted. The elders' faded leather scrolls record the transaction, and you receive small coupons, claims on gold stored indoors. Fortified granary to present at future stops. Here, local women's guilds, especially those of weavers and dyers, accept your gold coupons in exchange for lengths of indigo-dyed cloth, intricately woven in geometric patterns unique to each village. Beyond clothing, these textiles serve as store of value, folded and stored in wooden chests. They can be traded for local grains or salted fish later in the season. The role of religious networks. A few miles beyond Dor lies a modest Quranic school founded by an itinerant scholar from Timbuktu. As you arrive, the muezzin's call to prayer rises from a simple mud brick minaret, and a cluster of students gathers beneath a baobab tree. They recite verses and copy Quranic passages onto palm leaves, then smoothing them with plant oils. This madrasa, like others that dot the caravan routes, provides more than theological instruction. Scholars and clerics serve as trusted intermediaries. They authenticate merchants' documents, lend letters of introduction ijazah to foreign traders, and even settle commercial disputes according to Islamic legal principles, Sharia. Their judgment is respected because they are seen as impartial, literate, and bound by shared faith rather than local clan ties. You partake in a tea ceremony under the trespassed with mint and goat cheese crumbs, while a learned sheikh explains that trade is not merely an economic act but a moral covenant. Honesty, fair weight, and timely delivery are as much religious duties as charity, zakat, and prayer. This ethics-based network of trust bolsters the trade's resilience. Even in uncertain seasons, caravans can rely on these madrasa links to guarantee safe passage and fair dealings. The riverine shift from harvest to downstream trade. After a fortnight's trek, you descend toward the Niger Bend, where the river sweeps southward in a great arc. On its banks, the city of Timbuktu emerges, mud brick homes perched on a low plateau, its flat-roofed merchants' lodges clustered near the water's edge. Seasoned boatmen, long accustomed to navigating sandbars and seasonal floods, await the gold coupons you carry here. Trade shifts from land to water. Narrow longboats called meko and gufa plow the milky brown currents. You transfer your coupons to a river broker, and in return he hands you small wooden tokens carved with stylized crocodile heads, vouchers for gold to be collected in merchants' quarters along the river's southern stretches. The broker's wooden office is a low-ceilinged pavilion open on one side. Rice sacks and millet baskets form the desk, while keys to storage vaults hang on nails behind him as your caravan dissolves into the riverine network. You notice the pace of life changes. Rhythmic pole thrusts replace the desert's steady camel drums. Fishermen in canoes raise fine mesh nets under date palm groves. Women wash brightly colored cloth along the banks at sunset, the fabrics blooming like desert flowers. This transition from desert corridors to fertile floodplain mirrors the trade's adaptability. Goods seamlessly move from one transport mode to another, synchronized by notes, tokens, and local credit systems. Political stakes and shifting alliances. By the 13th century, regional powers recognized the gold trade's strategic value. The Mali Empire rose on the Niger's floodplain, consolidating control over key river ports. Under rulers like Sundiata Keita, Mali's army patrolled both desert tracks and riverbanks, ensuring safety for caravans aligned with imperial interests. In return, the emperor levied a gold tribute, a percentage of each caravan's yield, paid in gold dust or in land quotas granted to the empire. Court beneath the red clay walls of Niani, Mali's capital. Envoys from Ghana, Songhai, and distant North African cities presented gifts: live ostriches, elephant tusks, and embroidered veils. Yet the most coveted tribute was simply reliable gold flows. At times, Sundiata publicly redistributed surplus to quell local unrest, demonstrating that controlling trade meant controlling not only wealth but social cohesion. Nevertheless, shifting power dynamics sometimes disrupted routes. In 1310, a coral spear conflict erupted between two riverine chiefs near Gao, prompting a hiatus in northern river traffic. Caravans had to detour westward toward ancient gold mines at Bambauka, journey adding weeks to the schedule. Yet local leaders swiftly negotiated peace accords, recognizing the mutual benefit of unimpeded trade. The caravan continued, though on a new course, illustrating the network's resilience in the face of political turbulence. Cultural diffusion. Along the caravan's goods and wealth were not the only commodities transported. Ideas, art forms, and even culinary practices traveled alongside salt and gold. In Gao, court musicians adopted the Arabic oud, melding it with native string instruments to create the early Ngorni. In Timbuktu's manuscript workshops, Saharan ivory and desert silk threads became inlays in leather-bound Koran volumes, combining Maghreb craftsmanship with sub-Saharan motifs, geometric patterns, echoing both Berber tile work and West African textile designs. Local cuisines evolved too. Kola nuts from the forest zone were chewed alongside North African dates, spurring a new late-afternoon custom in desert oases, a sweet-sour snack accompanied by small glasses of spiced tea. Likewise, tea houses emerged in Sahelian towns, their brick ovens baking flatbreads flavored with nigella seeds, an aroma reminiscent of Mediterranean ovens. Thus, each caravan left behind layered cultural footprints, weaving a rich tapestry that extended beyond commerce. Unresolved threads in the fabric of trade as the riverboats pushed downstream toward Timbuktu's southern docks, and as desert caravans regrouped for the return north. You pause to consider the fragile interdependence you've witnessed. How did caravan families, often separated for months, maintain social and kinship bonds across such distances? What unwritten codes governed interactions between competing merchant groups when resources like caravan water wells became scarce, and when shifting sands or political skirmishes occasionally severed established routes? How quickly did traders rediscover or invent new pathways over time? Tonight, beneath a canopy of stars mirroring the golden dust once cradled in camel saddlebags, these questions drift like lantern smoke across the desert, mysterious, half-formed, beckoning you onward to uncover the final chapter of this hidden trade network. A climactic convergence at Timbuktu as the turquoise dawn light filters through date palms. You stand on the wooden deck of a shallow draft meko boat, watching the Niger's broad expanse shimmer beneath an endless sky. Your final tokens, those carved crocodile vouchers, are exchanged at Timbuktu's bustling riverbank market for gold dust sealed in leather pouches. Here southward and northward routes converge. Desert traders, river pilots, and Sahelian middlemen interlace in a living tapestry of commerce. In the sandstone bazaars near Sanka Madrasa, you witness the climax of centuries' work. Gold changing hands so rapidly it seems to float above the sandy ground. Merchants stack conical heaps of the precious dust under woven canopies. Clerics in indigo robes record proceedings in leather-bound ledgers. Rooftop watchmen ring bronze gongs to signal any unauthorized gathering near the granaries. This orchestrated dance, salt for gold, paper for coin, river for desert, reflects an ecosystem forged through human ingenuity and cultural symbiosis. The turning point, the fall of empires and shifting trade. By the mid-15th century, the West African gold trade faced new challenges. The rise of Songhai Empire under Sunni Ali and Askia Muhammad transformed political landscapes. Songhai's military might secured riverine corridors, but also imposed heavier tariffs. Caravan masters, once paying modest king's tribute in Ghana and Mali, now navigated shifting allegiances. Agreements inked in one season could be revoked by a new provincial governor the next. Simultaneously, Portuguese maritime exploration on the Atlantic coast introduced a sea-based alternative. By 1471, Portuguese galleons navigated down the Ghanaian shoreline, exchanging textiles, beads, and metal pans for gold, directly undercutting the centuries-old overland routes. Coastal kingdoms like Wolof and Bakongo began diverting trade toward ports such as Elmina and Luanda, lured by European silver and copper. As word spread, desert and river caravans saw dwindling gold flows. Some routes fell into disuse. Trans-Saharan traffic shrank. Timbuktu, once swelling with gold and scholars, gradually lost its sheen. Caravans that still braved the dunes did so more for salt, cola, or slave trade than gold alone. Yet, rather than vanishing entirely, the caravan networks adapted. Desert houses pivoted to ferrying cloth and firearms inward. Sahelian markets shifted toward regional staples. The economic gravity in West Africa moved from caravan oases to Atlantic ports, but the cultural legacies remained etched in architecture, language, and social memory. Human stories at the crossroads beyond empires and economics. The trade's human dimension endured. The descendants of desert guides still retold legends of vanished oases, once brimming wells now buried under dunes. In southern villages, elders spoke of ancestors who stitched protective amulets into camel saddlebags to ward off sand spirits. Women's quilting circles wove patterns inspired by Berber motifs, linking each blanket to an ancestral caravan journey. Artisans continued to carve Njoni skins with geometric marbling echoing map routes. Storytellers recited Griot's epic poems recounting the deeds of Sundiata and Askia, the crossings of merchant caravans, and the first meeting of Maghreb and Sahel cultures. Children played games simulating trade, exchanging pebbles as gold and sticks as salt, learned not just as diversion, but as early education in commerce and trust. The lasting impact on global commerce, though trans-Saharan gold caravans dwindled by the 17th century, their impact resonated far beyond Africa. Currency and credit. The region's early use of standardized gold dust and tokens influenced later African and European monetary systems, foreshadowing minted currencies and centralized banks. Cross-exchange, Arabic script and Islamic scholarship flourished in West Africa. In turn, African musical traditions and oral histories colored North African and Andalusian art. Maritime pivot. The shift to Atlantic seaborne trade, catalyzed by overland network decline, accelerated European colonial interests, altering world history through new trade patterns, colonial competition, and resource exploitation. Even today, you can trace ancient caravan tracks in satellite imagery, faint lines of denuded vegetation pointing toward buried wells. Timbuktu's manuscripts, fragile pages of sermons, legal contracts, and poetry survive in modern archives, testament to a once thriving intellectual hub born of gold's lure. Reflection. The quiet power of ordinary traders as you settle under a reed mat, the Niger's evening song lulling you toward rest. Consider the ordinary men and women who wove this vast desert to a delta tapestry. The camel nomads who trusted each other with life in the dunes, the sun-ink merchants who mastered river navigation, the scholars who forged legal frameworks, the artisans and farmers who sustained supply and demand. Their collective ingenuity underpinned trade routes that connected continents and cultures. In a world often shaped by kings and conquerors, these networks remind us that everyday resilience, cultural trust, and practical innovation can shift the currents of history as surely as empires rise and fall. The desert may swallow tracks, rivers may change course, and empires may collapse, but the human impulse to connect, to trade, and to learn from one another persists across the ages. With that, dear listener, our journey through the hidden networks of West African gold trade reaches its tranquil end. May the rhythm of camel steps, river currents, and traded gold inspire gentle slumber and thoughtful dreams. Imagine the lagoon's pale, dawn mist drifting over the canals of medieval Venice. Gondolas drift silently past rows of pastel palazzi, each window glowing with soft lantern light. In the distance, the low hum of wooden wheels and cobblestones heralds a new day. On the island of Murano, just north of Venice, proper smoke curls from tall brick chimneys, promising molten marvels within humble workshops. You cross the gently swaying wooden bridge linking Venice to Murano, the air tinged with salt and the faint sweetness of damp moss. Here, families have worked last since the late 13th century. The Venetian Senate, wary of fire spreading through crowded wooden neighborhoods, issued a decree in 1291. All furnaces must move to this outlying isle. What began as a safety measure transformed Murano into the world's premier glassmaking center. The glassmaker's studio stepped through the heavy wooden doors of a typical Murano studio. The space is long and narrow, its high walls clad in blackened brick along one side. A row of wood-fired furnaces glows like embers, each hearth roaring at nearly 1100 grados to 12 degrees Fahrenheit. Behind a low marble counter, benches line the floor. and walls hang with wooden peels, metal shears, and long steel blowpipes, each tool polished smooth by generations of handling. A master glassmaker or maestro presides at the main furnace, known as the genie, its arched brick mouth crowned by a hood that captures choking smoke. He wears a simple linen jacket and leather leggings, his forearms wrapped in cloth to guard against radiant heat. With a practiced flick of his wrist, he dips a pipe into the glowing heart of the furnace, gathering a gob of molten glass that shimmers like liquid sunset. Gathering and shaping the molten gather, bright orange, then yellow, is rolled rhythmically on a steel bench to form a uniform blob. Around him, apprentices bustle. One brings a small pot of colored glass powders made from metal oxides like cobalt and copper. Another readies a set of wooden molds, and a third fans the furnaces, bellows to maintain the flame. With a breath blown through the pipe, the maestro inflates the gather into a simple sphere. Within minutes, as the glass cools slightly, he re-enters the furnace to add more heat, then dips the softened glass into a tray of crushed turquoise powder, creating the first hint of opaque color. He returns to the bench, spinning the pipe, and tapping gently with metal tweezers, coaxing delicate ridges into the vessel's shoulder. Apprentices use long shears to trim stray drips, while others stand by with crocks of water for sudden quenching. Guild secrets and family lines. This craft, though noisy and fiery, remains shrouded in secrecy. Murano glassmakers belong to a powerful Arte de Vitri guild, whose statutes forbid masters from teaching the art outside Murano. Families such as the Barovier and Veningard, recipes for translucent ruby glass colored by gold chloride, or Millefiori cane's tiny floral cross-sections, passed down through apprenticeships. Any glassmaker caught revealing secret techniques risked exile to the mainland, exile from livelihood, status, and community. You sit on a low stool in a corner, watching as 3 generations of one family work side by side. A grandfather tending the furnace's firebox, a father shaping a goblet, and a teenage daughter stretching a fine glass thread for delicate filigree patterns. Their unspoken trust, forged through shared heat and risk of burns, allows them to coordinate complex multi-tool maneuvers, spinning, blowing, and trimming fluid forms in seamless harmony. Daily rhythms and social bonds are Murano glassmakers. Day begins before sunrise, with stoking the furnaces and inspecting refractory bricks for cracks. Work pauses midday for a simple meal, polenta with salt cod and a thin red wine from the mainland. Conversations swirl from kill temperatures to gossip of rival workshops. After the afternoon heat, masters demonstrate new color blends, a cobalt blue as deep as the lagoon, or a king's gold achieved by ultrafine gold dust. By dusk, the heated chaos gives way to quiet camaraderie. Apprentices sweep cooled benches and gather leftover colored broken glass fragments to remelt in small crucibles. In the crisp evening air, families gather for shared supper in modest homes clustered around the canal houses, animated by the day's share of warmth from glowing furnaces. Unresolved question yet for all its splendor. The fate of Murano's glass depended on external forces, shifts in trade, Venetian politics, and the arrival of new heat sources like coal. How would this delicate industry adapt when 17th century Europe demanded ever more intricate designs and lords sought exotic imports? And when flame-based furnaces faced competition from mechanized glassworks centuries later, could the hidden secrets of Murano's guild endure? As you step back onto the bridge toward Venice, you carry with you the echo of clinking glass, the furnace's breath, and the whispered promise of St. Risolde. Secrets still awaiting your next discovery. Guild authority and political privilege. The Senate's 1291 decree relocating glassworks to Murano. The Arte dei Vetri Guild received unprecedented political clout in return for concentrating furnaces on the island. Glassmasters gained unique privileges, exemption from certain taxes, the right to wear swords and residence permits, preventing other artisans from practicing on Murano or within Venice city walls. These decrees, annually renewed, ensured Murano's masters remained indispensable to the Republic inside the Scuola dei Vetri, the guild's modest meeting hall. You glimpse elaborate ceremonies reinforcing this power. On major feast days, masters gather in rows of carved wooden benches facing a simple altar adorned with hand-blown chandeliers. The guild Espodesta reads minutes from the previous year's disputes, records apprenticeships approved, and announces penalties for infractions. A theft of a recipe or unauthorized export of skilled workers could lead to the harshest sentence, banishment, which in effect was a death sentence for one's livelihood. Yet, the guild's strength masked underlying tensions. Masters sought new markets and techniques. Journeymen often chafed under strict hierarchies, and widowmakers, masters' wives responsible for numerous household tasks, pressured for greater influence over workshop management. Resolving these internal pressures required careful negotiation, formalized in guild ordinances that convened monthly councils of 12 elected masters versed in both craftsmanship and law. Technical advancements, from coal to microbubbles. The early 1400s. Europe's demand for ever finer glass and novel colors drove Murano's masters toward constant experimentation. Two innovations stand out: transition to coal-fired furnaces would have fueled Murano's furnaces for centuries, requiring vast tracts of Venetian woodlands. As deforestation loomed, coal imported by sea from England and Bohemia began supplementing wood in hybrid furnaces. Coal burned hotter and more steadily, allowing glassblowers finer control over melt temperatures. Challenge: coal, sulfur, and ash introduced impurities. Masters adapted by installing clay filters at chimneys and blending only specific coal grades. Result: the hotter furnaces enabled intricate latimo milk-white glass and improved clarity for colorless cristallo, prized in Renaissance palaces. Controlled microbubble patterns. Bullaconti master glassmaker Angelo Barovia pioneered the Bullaconti technique in the mid-15th century. By introducing tiny metal rods into the molten gather, he trapped microscopic air bubbles in precise patterns. The result: glass that glittered like starfields or swirling galaxies. Method: a rod dipped into the furnace, then inserted into the gather and slowly withdrawn, created linear bubble chains. Multiple insertions and rotations produced complex motifs. Impact: Bullaconti vases and goblets became coveted across Europe, their shimmering ovals and spirals appearing in princely courts from Florence to Krakow. These technical leaps required close collaboration between Marinisti color specialists, furnace masters, and metalworkers who devised specialized tools. They also introduced new training modules for apprentices, recorded in guild manuscripts now housed in Venice's Archivio di Stato. Economic integration, export networks, and merchant syndicates. Murano's glass was more than an island's crafted that became an empire of trade. Venetian merchant families formed Fraglia di Vettere syndicates that managed to export, credit, and branding. Fraglia dell'Oro handled luxury crystal and gold-threaded filigree pieces. They commissioned painted labels bearing both Murano Guild seals and their own merchant crests, guaranteeing authenticity at foreign ports. Fraglia dei Coralli specialized in coral red glass, glasses achieved with colloidal gold, and marketed them alongside genuine coral from the Mediterranean reefs. Their merchants traveled to Flanders, England, and Istanbul, negotiating exclusive contracts with royal courts. Contracts drafted in Italian, Latin, and occasionally French stipulated quantities, prices, and delivery times. Glass crates, lined with straw to cushion delicate forms, were transported by gondola to Venice's Grand Canal, then loaded onto merchant galleys bound for Alexandria, Bruges, or Seville. Venetian brokers provided letters of credit, enabling northern buyers to settle in Florentine florins or Genoese silver. Despite the high cost of Murano glass, which could fetch up to 10 times the price of local wares, demand soared. Glass workers on Murano numbered around 1,200, nearly one-fifth of the island's population. The infusion of well-funded larger family palazzos on Venice's canals, adorned with Murano chandeliers and colorless obsidian mirrors, a silent badge of belonging to the glass-making elite. Day-to-day workshop life and social dynamics behind the glamorous exports lay the everyday grind. Apprentices, Garzoni aged as young as 10, lived with master families, learning to mix raw materials, soda ash from burnt plants, limestone, silica sand from Venetian dunes. Their first task was preparing cales, vetterea, washing and grinding components into a fine meal. Journeymen managed blowing cycles, skillfully gauging furnace temperature by color and viscosity. Their pay measured per piece depended on speed and precision. A flawed goblet could mean a day's wages lost. Women's roles: a master's wife supervised double furnaces, secondary ovens, keeping workpieces at unnailing temperatures. 450600 securi levi stress. Widowmakers also handled sales in local markets. They recognized valued customers by face, negotiated smaller contracts, and managed household finances. Evenings brought relaxation and cultural exchange. Apprentices sang madrigals as they polished, spent cullet. Masters recounted gossip of Venice's political intrigues, senators' alliances, naval battles with Genoa, and the ever-present threat of Ottoman expansion across the Adriatic. These conversations, conducted in Venetian dialect with floral idioms, la vita e un boccia, di vetro, life as a glass bubble, deepened bonds and fostered creative cross-pollination. Tensions, decline, and the 17th century challenge. By the late 16th century, Murano faced new perils. Rival glass centers emerged. Bohemian glass, protected by local guilds in the Holy Roman Empire. Bohemian craftsmen exploited abundant forest wood and later coal, producing heavily faceted rama goblets that appealed to northern tastes. English glasshouses in London and Bristol. Huguenot refugees introduced fresh techniques, including lead crystal, denser, more refractive than Venetian crystal. Merchants, pilgrims, and officials, a cross-section of society that decayed was a social equalizer. At one moment, a silk merchant from Kyoto negotiates with a horse leaser using a small porcelain scale to weigh silver. The next, a mountain ascetic in patched robes strides, barefoot beneath an umbrella, seeking lodging and alms. A court official, his ledger-bound messenger trailing behind, reviews carefully folded maps of domain boundaries, while a young writer from Osaka rides in a lacquered palanquin, jotting haiku verses inspired by each station's unique scenery. Morihiro, a traveling ink merchant, recounts an argument in 1625 between two samurai over an ivory inkstone purchased in Hakanajuku. The dispute earned them a formal reprimand at the next daimyo's checkpoint. Meanwhile, pilgrims bound for a TSHG shrine at Ueno pause at Kanagawa-juku to purchase blessed amulets Ofuda, stamped with Shinto deities, then present them at each station's small roadside Hakura shrine for protection against highwaymen and tempest. Such interactions reinforced political control. By hosting this tapestry of travelers, post stations served as intelligence hubs. Local magistrates compiled post-station reports documenting fluctuations in traveler origins, luggage, volumes, noting, for instance, a surge in luggage for Edo's annual Cherry Blossom Festival, and unusual conveyance requests. These data informed shogunate policies on toll adjustments, seasonal travel advisories, and security deployments. Tea and sweets, regional specialties. Each station boasted a local specialty designed to entice weary travelers. Kawasaki's fresh river eels, grilled over charcoal, glazed with a brush of sweet soy, and served on flat wooden trays. Their smoky aroma lured even those nursing horsesore backs. Yui's sakura mochi, soft rice cakes wrapped in salted cherry blossom leaves, sold at a roadside stall beneath blooming trees, a fleeting luxury in early spring. Kanbara's issued stone pass, sweet potatoes baked in volcanic sand and served with a sprinkling of local kelp salt, prized for sustained energy. You join a small cluster of travelers at a modest tea house Kobai where low stools line a raised wooden porch overlooking rice paddies. A server in a lavender kimono presents porcelain cups of thin, slightly bitter sencha followed by pale pink mochi glimmering with salted leaf veins. Conversation drifts from the next checkpoint's toll rates to whispers of a plague outbreak. In Hamamatsujuku, some travelers opt to skip that station entirely, circling wide through secondary roads to avoid infection. Postal relay, the Haikoku system behind public travel, lay an intricate courier network. Official Haikoku riders carried the shogun's sealed orders and private letters for daimyo, private couriers ronin, and shinobi transported messages for merchants and families. Relay stations stationed fresh horses every few weeks, enabling official dispatches to cover up to 200 rides per day, astonishing speed in pre-modern times. At Kawasaki-juku's relay corral, you watch as a crimson lacquered Haikyo palanquin is lowered from its porters. A new team of 4 porters, each wearing white linen sashes emblazoned with the courier's monolith, sits seamlessly. The rider, dressed in blue-trimmed hakama, exchanges a small wooden tablet moken containing the message. Security checks stamps on both makon and palanquin, ensuring no tampering. Within minutes, the courier is off his sandals, pounding a steady beat as he vanishes along the winding road. This highly organized system inspired later European postal models. Historians note how Japanese daimyo envoys introduced relaxed concepts to Dutch traders in Nagasaki by the early 17th century. The Dutch East India Company later adapted similar horse-based stations in Java and Ceylon. Medicine, prevention, and the plague fear travelers faced hazards beyond banditry and fatigue. Seasonal outbreaks of smallpox and dysentery loomed. Each station maintained a small dispensary yakyoku, staffed by an Isan herbalist who prescribed simple remedies. Powdered sinkana, bark imported in tiny quantities via Nagasaki for fevers, ginger-infused hot sake for digestive distress, and poultices of plantain leaves to treat blisters from new straw sandals. Carved wooden kasatsu near the magistrate's office warned of quarantines. Travelers from affected stations faced mandatory isolation in a small Yamabushi lodge outside. The main posted single-room tatami mat swapped after each occupant to prevent disease spread, though scant by modern standards. These measures mitigated epidemic severity and demonstrated a proto-public health system intertwined with the post-station network unresolved. Question: as you strap on your sandals for the day's journey to you pause at Kawasaki's Ichirizu-commanded stone markers flanking the road, praying for safe passage. The sun climbs, and with it, the post-station's hum fades into the countryside's rhythmic ricefield irrigation channels. But questions remain. How did station communities administer quarantine without stifling commerce? How did the distribution of herbal remedies evolve when foreign medicines, like cinchona, became more abundant? And in an era where travel airmets controlled movement, did the Tokeda's vitality ever clash with the shogunate's desire for social order? As your journey continues, these puzzles trail behind you like footprints in the sand, softly urging exploration of the final chapter in Edo's quiet post-station revolution. A summit at Shinagawa in the shogunates reformed by the mid-century. Growing traffic along the Tokeda, pilgrims, merchants, entertainers, and official envoys strained station resources. Shinagawa-juku, once a modest way station, swelled into a bustling hub. Narrow alleys teemed with tea houses advertising exotic black teas. Taverns echoed with shamisen chords. Pack horses nosed each other in crowded stables. Recognizing both the strategic importance and the logistical pinch, the shogunate convened a Tokeda council in 1768. representatives of all 19 post stations, magistrates from Edo and Kyoto, and select daimyo advisors gathered in Edo's Hyojisho Hall. Their mandate: modernize station infrastructure without undermining local autonomy. Key reforms enacted over the next decade included standardized lodging capacity, minimum numbers of tatami rooms per station based on traveler volumes, reducing overcrowding. Improved water and sewage systems, bamboo aqueducts extended from upstream springs, shared wells lined with stone to prevent contamination, simple stone drainage channels separated human and animal waste, medical outposts, permanent health shelters staffed by Hanshi rural medical practitioners trained in both Campo Chinese and local herbal remedies, improving response to outbreaks. Postal efficiency measures, relay stations equipped with pre-saddled horses and seated saddles, umakura, reducing courier changeover times by 20%. These reforms, though modest, revitalized the Tokeda's reputation. Caravan masters noted smoother departures, lower illness rates among travelers, and fewer disputes over lodging. Magistrates credited the network's efficiency with strengthening centralized control. Messengers carried new proclamations faster, and data on traveler patterns improved domain governance. From highways to railways, Majira transitions. The quiet order of Edo's highways would not last. In 1872, under the newly established Meiji government, Japan's first railway line opened between Tokyo, formerly Edo, and Yokohama, tracing yet also surpassing the old Tokeda route. Stations like Kawasaki and Shinagawa became major train stops there. Honjin and Hatago repurposed into early hotels for arriving industrialists. This shift posed existential questions for the post-station towns. Economic adaptation: many inns transformed into tea houses for railway passengers. Stone warehouses near the old canals served as freight depots. Cultural preservation: local guilds, conscious of their heritage, formed Takeda preservation societies, marking surviving Ichirizuka and restoring Kasatsu boards as historical monuments. Transportation legacy: former relay routes became paved roads, still used by rickshaws and early The elderly post-station masters, now town elders, guided municipal planners to integrate new train stations without erasing old in districts. Though steam locomotives rendered horse travel obsolete, the spirit of connection endured. The Tokeda main line remains Japan's busiest rail corridor, its modern namesake tracing ancient paths, hugging coastal cliffs, and bridging urban centers just as the post stations once did. Social and cultural reverberations beyond physical infrastructure. The Tokeda-S network fostered enduring cultural exchanges. Literary inspiration: the 1830s print series, 53 Stations of the Tokeda by Yutagoa Hiroshige, immortalized each station's landscape and daily life, shaping Japan's modern sense of place. Culinary traditions: station specialties like Mishima's pine nut rice cakes and Hakane's black eggs boiled in sulfur springs became regional delicacies, sold today at train stops and highway rest areas. Pilgrimage tourism: modern travelers still undertake the Edo Tokeda Walk, tracing centuries-old footpaths, staying in refurbished Hatago inns, and following landlit stone markers through bamboo groves. Station towns host annual festivals reenacting courier runs, complete with costumed haikaku races and tea ceremonies. At restored Kobai, in these rituals, communities honor their ancestors' roles as keepers of travel, hospitality, and communication, reminding each generation that these local institutions once underpinned a peaceful, interconnected realm. As European courts diversified tastes, Murano masters confronted eroding market share. Complaints rose in the scuola, our secrets leaked like molten streams. The guild cracked down further on apprentices, leaving Moreno to work abroad, imposing heavier fines and requiring bonds to ensure return. The Senate, balancing political clout with economic need, occasionally intervened, imposing tariffs on foreign glass imports to protect Murano's artisans. Yet adaptation continued. Murano masters blended crystal techniques with native artistry, creating early flashed glass, a thin overlay of colored glass atop clear crystal, etched away to reveal intricate patterns. They also marketed Essence of Venice, bottles containing scented oils and perfumes, capitalizing on Venice's reputation for luxury to extend glasswork into new domains. Unresolved questions and the path ahead as you leave the smoldering glow of Murano studios, carrying the faint scent of burning soda and crushed cobalt ore, ponder the future. Can an island of artisanal secrets repel the tidal wave of industrialization? How will the balance between tradition and innovation evolve when mass production undercuts hand-blown craftsmanship? And what becomes of the personal bonds and apprenticeship rituals when profit margins demand ever faster output? The chimneys continued to smoke, night falls, and lantern Moronas cast shifting reflections on canal water. The glassmaker's cycle gate, blow-shaped cell repeats in hushed determination, awaiting new demands and daring solutions. Imagine stepping onto the dusty road at dawn, the rising sun painting Mount Fuji's snow-capped peak in soft rose. You stand in Nihonbashi, the bustling bridge in Edo, modern Tokyo, where Japan's network of highways begins. Merchants wheel handcarts piled high with silk bolts, Samurai lacquered helmets shining, stride purposefully to lunar palace courts. Rickshaws jinrickshaw clatter between tea houses, and porters hauling footlockers herald noble travelers. This road is the Tokaido, the Eastern Sea Road, one of 5 major routes established by the Tokugawa shogunate around 1600 to unify a land recently torn by civil war. Stretching 314 miles to Kyoto, the Tokaido links daimyo domains, castle towns, and cultural capitals. To facilitate travel and commerce and to keep the shogun's watchful eye, shukuba post stations were laid out at regular intervals. Purpose and planning: each shukuba served 3 essential functions: rest and resupply. Humble rice inspectors or aristocratic envoys could find tea houses chaya, simple inns hatago, and stables for pack horses. Communication relay: official couriers bore haikaku dispatches between Edo and the imperial court in Kyoto, ensuring the shogunate's edicts reached distant provinces swiftly. Inspection and security: checkpoints at each station verified travel permits, collected tolls, and deterred bandits. Stations were spaced roughly 5 to 7 ri apart, 12 to 16 kilometers. A day's journey on foot. The shogunate mandated uniform standards, wide main roads, stone-paved resting areas, and dedicated lanes for official processions. Local village councils supplied labor to build and maintain station facilities, while station masters Shukuya Bugyo reported monthly to regional magistrates on traveler volumes, toll income, and any incidents. Architecture and layout: arriving at the first post station, Shinagawa-juku, you pass a towering wooden gateway, its beams painted vermilion, kanji banners unfurling in the breeze. Beyond lies a grid of thatched roof buildings, lining a straight thoroughfare. Honjin exclusive, lodgings for daimyo and high-ranking officials, 2-story structures with totemai-floored reception rooms, private gardens, and attached stables for prized horses. Waki-honjin. Secondary official inns reserved when the honjin is full. Slightly smaller but similarly appointed hatago common inns catering to merchants and pilgrims. Their ground floors bustling with smoke-stained kitchens and tatami rooms where up to 20 travelers could share a meal of miso soup, rice, and pickled vegetables. Kasatsu display boards, tall wooden planks near the gateway on which the announcements, curfews, travel bans, and moral edicts were posted for all to read. Behind the inns, narrow alleys lead to Nakaba stables where pack horses and cargo palanquins awaited their next journey. Water troughs supplied by wooden aqueducts ensured both humans and beasts remained hydrated. Lantern-lit stone markers spaced every CHE by Lingjio meters kept travelers informed of distances, a rudimentary GPS of its day. Daily rhythms and social interaction: by mid-morning, the station's rhythms awaken. Porters shout rates for carrying guests on their shoulders. Tea house attendants sweep fallen leaves into bamboo bins. Sutra sellers sell hand-copied Buddhist prayers to pilgrims bound for TSHG shrine in Ni. Children dash about, delivering firewood bundles to inns, while itinerant performers juggle wooden balls on crossroads to earn coins. Station masters convene at the magistrate's office, a low-slung roofed hall beside the main road to file daily tallies. Number of Haikyoku dispatches delivered, toll revenue from pack horses and kogo, incidents of theft, bandit sightings, or unlicensed travel scripts. Kanban and scrolls fill in the margins, noting irregularities. A group of ronin, masterless, samurai lodging too many nights at a hatago or a merchant caravan exceeding permitted load limits. Swift action warnings or fines helps maintain order across the shogun's domain. Unresolved question: though these stations facilitated unprecedented connectivity, they also created potential flashpoints. Unchecked movement could harbor spies, and heavy traffic risked spread of disease. How did station communities balance hospitality with vigilance? And as the mid-19th century brought Western steamships and telegraphs, could the centuries-old shukuba system adapt, or would it fall to the tides of modernization? As you strap on your sandals ready for the next leg toward Kawasaki Jukarusling, bamboo groves beyond the station beckon you onward through time, where tradition and change await. The pulse of a post-station as dawn gives way to morning. Kawasaki Juku second. Stop from Nihonbashi stirs to life. Lanterns extinguished, shopkeepers unfold Norin curtains over their doorways, and the scent of grilled sweet potatoes drifts down the main thoroughfare. You step over wooden thresholds into a modest hatago courtyard, where porters stow travelers' straw hats and you tie on a fresh pair of straw sandals, weariji steamed and softened overnight for comfort. Inside the inn's central hall, a low table groans under steaming bowls of wakame miso soup, rice, and grilled fish. Without haste, a hallmark of Edo courtesy, attendants pour fragrant green tea from iron kyusu teapots into delicate porcelain cups painted with pine and crane motifs. The innkeeper, his sleeves rolled high, greets each guest by name, meticulously recorded when you checked in, and confirms departure arrangements. Horse rental, kogo scheduling, or foot passage with rested pack animals. Outside, the steady click of hooves on packed earth marks the departure of an official Haikyoku courier, clad in indigo cotton with a white circumferential sash bearing the shogunate crest. He bears a lacquered wooden box, its interior lined with oiled paper to protect urgent dispatches. 2 armed escorts accompany him on horseback, their polished, cuirasses glinting in the sun. Villagers pause in their morning chores, rice threshing or charcoal making, to bow as he passes. A silent salute to the shogun's messenger. Conveyance, horses, palanquins, and foot travelers along the Tokata. Shows between 3 conveyances, each with its own social and economic implications. Pack horses, cost moderate. Leasing a horse at each station cost roughly 2 to 3 mon of silver per re-traveled. Speed 7 to 8 ri per day under good conditions. Status preferred by merchants or lower-ranking samurai lacking retinue wealth. Palanquins. Cargo cost higher. A cargo 2 poles balanced on a porter's shoulders carrying 1 passenger and 5 to 6 mon per ri, often shared among 2 travelers to reduce expense. Speed similar to horses but slower on steep terrain. Ideal for comfort in summer's heat. Status widely used by wealthy townspeople and lower nobility, also by foreign traders who prized seated comfort. Walking fumiaruki cost free, only the price of footwear and lodging. Speed 5 to 6 ri per day, but allowed greater interaction with local environments. Status favored by pilgrims, less affluent artisans, and official inspection teams who needed to survey road conditions closely at Kawasaki-juku. Dozens of porters, each bearing a distinctive hand-woven straw badge, indicating affiliation with a particular inn huddle near the stable lane, awaiting clients. They chant their rates in unison: kago, fumiaruki. Their voices blend into the station's rhythm, a living marketplace of labor. Reflection. The human web of connection as night falls over Tokyo Bay. The distant rumble of trains replaces the clip-clop of hooves. Neon lights flicker where lanterns once glowed, yet etched into every platform and alleyway. Echoes of Eden. Post stations persist in tea houses framed by sliding CHG screens, in clusters of stone mileposts by roadside shrines, and in the shared memory of travelers who pause to bow at a restored Ichirizuka mound. The Tokata Post Station network reminds us that true connectivity arises not from technology alone, but from human relationships. Hospitality extended in straw-sandaled steps, trust forged through shared meals, and order maintained by countless local hands. Long before telegraphs and telephones, these stations wove Japan together, one pilgrim, merchant, and courier at a time. And so our exploration of the quiet revolution of Japan's Edo-era post stations draws to a close. May the gentle cadence of that ancient road guide you into restful slumber, pondering how simple acts of welcoming and exchange can knit a nation as closely as riveted steel. Imagine standing on the banks of the Thames at low tide in summer 1858. A noxious stench clings to the damp air, rotting refuse, industrial effluent, and human waste congealed into black sludge along the riverbanks. Gas lamps flicker in the fog, illuminating sluggish barges coated in filth. London's heart pulses with nearly 2 million residents, yet its veins and arteries, the streets and waterways, run thick with raw sewage, a city drowning in its own waste by mid-century. London's rapid expansion, spurred by the Industrial Revolution and countryside migration, overwhelmed medieval drainage. Narrow alleyways and open sewers, hollows carved between cobblestones, channeled waste directly into the Thames at high tide, then back into streets at low tide. Cholera outbreaks surged. 10,000 deaths in 1832, another 14,000 in 1848-49. Parliament passed successive public health acts, yet London's stench, dubbed the Great Stink, peaked in summer 1858. When the river odor in Westminster interfered with parliamentary debate, early proposals and political stalemate. Municipal surveys in the 1840s mapped existing drains and assessed volume. Each person contributed an average of 4 gallons of waste daily. Engineers Sir Edwin Chadwick and Thomas Wixty proposed intercepting sewers along each bank, diverting flow eastward to outfalls below high tide levels. Yet London's patchwork of vestries lacking centralized authority. A stalled action through endless local committees and funding disputes. Even the site of Westminster's benches vacated by fainting legislators failed to spur immediate approval. Finally, in August 1858, when the stench rendered the House of Commons unusable, MPs scrambled to fund urgent measures, greenlighting an ambitious sewer overhaul under the leadership of Chief Engineer Joseph Bazalgette. Bazalgette's grand vision chaining together clipboards and surveying instruments. Bazalgette marshaled an army of surveyors and draftsmen. His plan: construct 82 miles of covered brick intercepting sewers, 38 on the north bank, 44 on the south, each 10 feet in diameter, running at a slight gradient toward the river's eastern estuary. From those mains, 1,100 miles of local sewers would connect every street, draining into 12 pumping stations that lifted flow over embankments. Key to the design was overcapacity. Bazalgette doubled the required diameter to allow for future population growth. He spec'd out red-fired brick vaults, Portland cement lining, and Castile and egg-shaped tunnels to optimize hydraulic flow. For outfalls, he chose Barking and Essex and Crossness in Kent locations below tidal influence where twin monumental Sewage pumping stations would discharge waste on ebb tide. Construction challenges and labor work began in 1859 under hundreds of laborers known as navvies, many of them Irish immigrants fleeing famine. At each shaft site, marked by temporary sheds and scaffolding teams, excavated deep pits amid unstable clay. Timber props prevented cave-ins while steam-powered cranes lowered men and materials. Docklands tramways shuttled brick and cement. Horses hauled Bowser carts of quicklime to sanitize shafts. In Fitzrovia, worker cottages sprang up around holes 15 feet deep. Accidents, falls, flooding, bursts of noxious gas were common. Yet under foreman's whistles and Bazalget's weekly inspections, progress marched steadily. By 1865, 3 major interceptors and 2 pumping stations neared completion even. As cholera cases plummeted. An unfinished step. Water treatment. Bazalget's system solved removal but not purification. Sewage discharged directly into the estuary, diluting with tidal flows. Londoners cheered the end of stink seasons, yet fish kills and shellfish poisoning persisted downstream. Plans for sewage farms' land-based infiltration beds were proposed but slow to implement, raising early questions about the balance of engineering triumph and environmental impact. As you gaze at the partially completed brick vault emerging from the riverbank, a testament to Victorian ambition, consider the immense coordination, political resolve, and human toil required to tame London's filth. But with a command to discharge raw sewage into tidal waters, the long shadow of unintended consequences lay across the Thames. Industrial future. Completing the intercepting sewers. By 1862, Joseph Bazalget's intercepting sewers had extended eastward beyond central London, carving beneath bustling streets and affluent squares. In Marylebone, workmen tunneled under Oxford Street, laying 12-foot diameter brick arches 60 feet below roadway level. At Holborn, they drove shafts through the compact London clay, famously stable, but at times waterlogged. Substratum using cast urine ring linings to prevent collapse. Surface level disruption was minimized by the Catan cover method. Only where possible, short sections of street were excavated, linings installed, then immediately backfilled to restore traffic. Where roads remained open, ingenious temporary bridges of timber and planked passages carried pedestrians over narrow trenches, still echoing with pickaxe strikes. By 1865, the entire North Bank interceptor stretching from Hampstead Road to Whitechapel was connected, carrying raw sewage east under gravitational pull to the Abbey Mills. Pumping station. Abbey Mills. The Cathedral of Sewage. Abbey Mills in Stratford emerged as the network's crown jewel. Bazalget designed a 4-tower pumping station, each crowned with a soaring Gothic turret. Inside, colossal beam engines manufactured by James Watt & Co. stood poised. Each cylinder pumped 60,000 gallons of sewage per hour through 19-inch diameter mains into the outfall embankment just downstream. Travelers arriving by railway in Stratford reported first glimpsing the station's twin red brick towers, a curious sight amid pastoral Essex fields. At midday, they might hear deep chuffs as steam whistles timed the shifting of heavy valves. Foremen in waistcoats and top hats oversaw stokers shoveling coal into furnace grates, while engineers monitored polished brass pressure gauges and lubricated massive crankshafts. Abbey Mills handled the North Bank's flow. The South Bank, Crossness pumping station, completed in 1865, mirrored its function, though in a far more restrained Italianate style. There, 3 large engines drove sewage into the Dartford Creek outfall at high tide, their massive flywheels glimmering copper-bright under glass-roofed engine houses. Social transformations along the network as interceptors and pumps tamed the Thames' immediate stench. Londoners' daily lives transformed subtly yet profoundly. Public health improvement. Cholera's grip loosened. Mortality in central districts dropped by 1/3 between 1860 and 1870. Hospital records credit reduced waterborne disease, even though germ theory remained contested. John Snow's findings linking cholera to contaminated water only gradually shaped public policy. Urban expansion. Land once avoided for sewage odors, Usavoke wharves and mile-end marshlands became viable for housing and industry. New row houses and factories sprang up, accelerating East London's growth and diversifying its economy beyond docks and breweries. Labor employment. The sewer works employed over 15,000 laborers at peak. Many Irish immigrants found stable wages compared to agricultural precarity. Beneath cobbled streets, these navvies forged a gritty subculture. Songs of shovel and picks, communal shantytowns at shaft sites, and mutual aid societies that prefigured modern labor unions. Yet, tensions simmered. Public funds poured into engineering feats, while housing reform lagged. Whereas sewer construction cleansed streets, overcrowded slums remained breeding grounds for disease, and displaced waste simply shifted downstream, leaving poorer communities to bear new environmental burdens. Environmental trade-offs and the sewage farm experimental discharge at outfalls sparked early environmental concerns. Landowners downstream in the Thames estuary protested fish die-offs and shellfish beds once famed fell silent. In response, Bazalgette proposed sewage farms, large tracts of farmland where effluent could percolate through soils, nourishing crops in a cyclic reuse system. Pilot sites emerged at Bedtime and Longreach, spanning hundreds of acres. Sewage was spread over pasture, then allowed to leach through topsoil into drainage ditches. Early reports hailed lush grass growth, supporting sheep grazing green gold, called by local farmers. Yet odors and insects troubled neighbors, and concerns about pathogens entering groundwater persisted. By the 1880s, only a fraction of London's sewage received such treatment. The majority still flowed unabated into tidal Thames. Critics, newly empowered by rising environmental awareness, argued that sewage farms, while beneficial locally, failed to address broader estuary pollution. They lobbied for mechanical treatment, plants ultimately realized only in the 20th century. Cultural reflections, from satire to pride, Victorian writers, ever attuned to London's paradoxes, wove sewage into literature and humor. Punch magazine, cartoons lampooned politicians fleeing Stinkapalooza sessions in Westminster. Gilbert and Sullivan's operettas sneered at aristocrats holding their noses while debating reforms. Yet engineers and philanthropists wore their achievements proudly. Bazalgette was celebrated as a public benefactor, awarded a knighthood in 1873. Public exhibitions displayed detailed models of sewers and pumping stations, evoking wonder at both scale and ingenuity. Schoolchildren drew maps of London's hidden underworld, and illustrated guides explained how London's bowels now carried waste safely away. Technological legacy and global influence. Bazalgette's intercepting sewers became a template for modern sanitation. Worldwide, New York City, late 19th century, modeled its Croton aqueduct drainage schemes on London's intercepting principle, diverting Harlem River waste beyond populated areas. Paris revamped its sewers under Baron Haussmann, incorporating wider tunnels and separate stormwater channels, echoing Bazalgette's grade-separated approach. On Mumbai, Bombay extended a similar grid of covered drains and pumping stations in the 1880s, aiming to conquer monsoon season overflows by echoing London's gradient designs. Furthermore, London's sewage farms inspired agricultural reuse practices in Australia and Canada, though later overtaken by chemical and biological treatment methods. Unresolved questions and modern resonance as you cross tonight's modern Thames path, passing illuminated cycleways above Bazalgette's buried brick tunnels, ponder enduring questions. How might the Victorian system cope today, with 6 times the population and emerging contaminants, pharmaceuticals, microplastics unknown in the 19th century? Would decentralized, localized treatment like community wetlands fare better than large centralized pumping stations? And in an era of climate change and rising sea levels, can gravity-based sewers built on the principle of downhill flow withstand future flood challenges? Bazalgette's legacy flows beneath us always, a hidden infrastructure ensuring public health, supporting urban life, and reminding us that engineering solutions carry both societal benefit and environmental costs. With that, dear listener, journey through Victorian London's sewer revolution concludes. May the steady hum of modern pumps and the whisper of Thames breezes guide you into a tranquil rest, musing on the unseen networks beneath our feet that shape daily life. Imagine the dawn's pale light filtering through painted glass of a wooden minaret as you enter Istanbul's Grand Bazaar in 1555. The air is dense with exotic aromas, leather from harness shops, crushed rosewater from perfumers, and beneath it all, a rich, earthy fragrance you recognize as freshly roasted coffee. This is the birthplace of the Ottoman coffeehouse, where sultans, couriers, scholars, and ordinary artisans alike converge over dark brews in tiny porcelain cups adorned with turquoise crescents. The journey of coffee story begins in Yemen, where Sufi mystics brewed the berries into a dark infusion called kahwa to sustain their night-long devotions. By the early 16th century, Yemeni traders introduced coffee to Mecca's pilgrims, and word spread to Cairo. Markets, Venetian merchants, ever vigilant for novel imports, supplied Ottoman grand viziers with samples, prompting Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent's decree authorizing the first official coffee import by 1554. First, Ottoman coffeehouses in Istanbul's neighborhoods near the Hippodrome in Hagia Sophia. Itinerant vendors initially sold coffee from street carts. Soon, entrepreneurs established permanent coffee in low, domed rooms with cushioned divans each centered around a copper brazier heating long-handled cesspots of water and finely ground beans from Mocha. Attendants in long robes and fez caps learned precise rituals, timing the boil, skimming foam, and serving each demitasse with a sugar cube and a salted date to cleanse the palate. Social functions and cultural norms, coffeehouses rapidly became hubs of conversation and information. In Fenar district, scribes pored over illuminated manuscripts. In Sultanahmet, theologians debated jurisprudence. In Galata, merchants from Genoa and Venice haggled over silk shipments. Women were largely excluded, and entry required modest attire and humility. Yet within minutes of settling on a divan, strangers, Jewish goldsmiths, Armenian tailors, Muslim clerics exchanged news from Cairo's markets or rumors of Safavid unrest. Unresolved question. Despite coffeehouses' vital role in Ottoman civil life, they faced criticisms. Viziers worried that idle chatter might spark sedition, while conservative ulama decried coffee as intoxicant wine of the Turks. How did these humble gathering places strike a balance between fostering civic discourse and navigating political suspicion? And how would their rituals evolve as the Ottoman Empire encountered European Enlightenment and modernity's new curiosities? As you cradle your porcelain cup, its sweet foam winking in candlelight, consider how this simple bean would shape empire, society, and the very rhythm of urban life. Morning preparations and the rhythm of service before sunrise. The coffeehouse prepare. Boy apprentices sweep mosaic-tiled floors, roll out kilim rugs, and polish low brass tables until they gleam. The master roaster tests green beans imported from Mocha, snapping a few between thumb and forefinger to gauge moisture. Over a charcoal brazier he toasts small batches, listening for the first pop that signals proper roast depth. By mid-morning the door flaps open as merchants, scribes, and artisans stream in. Each receives a slender tulip-shaped glass, warmed on the brazier before a thin layer of dark brew is poured. A swirl of foam called KP crowns the cup, and servers add a piece of crystallized sugar or date. The ritual is exacting. No spoon, no waste. The bitter dregs savored as a final nod to hospitality. Center of news and debate, coffeehouses become living bulletin boards. In Eminan, porters bring letters from Cairo. In Uskadar, travelers describe new Persian carpet designs. In Bait, scribes read aloud dispatches from the Grand Vizier's office. Patrons exchange gossip on everything from grain shortages to court intrigues. Political discussions flourish often in hushed tones. Poets recite verses celebrating Sultan Ahmed's conquest of Cyprus. Staunch conservatives lament rising tax burdens. When debates grow heated, a subtle hand gesture signals the coffeehouse owner to offer another round, enough to calm tempers before they boil over. Coffee, culture, and consciences. Afternoon light dims. Storytellers meta and shadow play. Troops carracks perform, their social satire riffing off coffeehouse chatter. Ottoman elites relish embroidery patterns inspired by kaffiflam smoke plumes. Architects embed bow-shaped arches recalling Cez handles into new mansions, yet authorities view coffee's power warily. In 1651, Grand Vizier Kaprulu Memd Pasha temporarily banned coffeehouse, deeming them schools of vice. The streets quieted as soldiers patrolled, shutting doors. But within weeks, public outcry forced a reversal. Even the ulama admitted coffee's sobriety aided concentration in prayer. Unresolved questionnaires. Dusk falls and lantern light flickers on ivory chessboards. You wonder, in an empire spanning 3 continents, could coffeehouses remain engines of social cohesion, bridging faiths and classes without igniting political unrest? And how would the seeds sown in Ottoman casas take root in European salons and modern cafes to come? The caf spreads across continents by the late 17th century. News of Ottoman coffeehouses reached Vienna. Couriers spoke of Turkish wine that sharpened the mind. In 1683, following the siege of Vienna, an Austrian officer discovered sacks of coffee left by retreating Ottoman troops. These beans were roasted and brewed in Viennese courts, sparking Europe's cafe culture. Parisian salongoers and London's literati soon emulated Istanbul's kavahen, adapting rituals, fine porcelain, delicate sugar lumps, even dalla-shaped pots to suit local tastes. Yet European cafes lacked the Ottoman blend of religious debate, poetic recitation, and Sufi mysticism. Instead, Enlightenment thinkers convened over coffee. Voltaire drank 9 cups daily, while Rousseau drafted treatises in Paris's Caf Procope. In each case, the coffeehouse became a crucible of ideas, echoing the Ottoman fusion of faith, poetry, and politics. Coffeehouses and social change in the empire. Within the Ottoman realm, coffeehouse continued evolving. In provincial towns Berzah, Aleppo, Thessaloniki adopted regional architecture, arched wooden screens, mosaic fountains murmuring cool water, and low brass lanterns painted with Iznik patterns. The Maradi coffeehouse in Bursa became famed for its walnut and cardamom blend. In Damascus, citron-scented coffee soothed summer heat. The Tanzimat reforms, 1839 to 1876, modernized Ottoman administration. Coffeehouses played roles as hubs for political reformers. Young intellectuals gathered to read French newspapers smuggled into Smyrna and debate constitutional reforms. In 1876, the first Ottoman parliament members quaffed coffee in Galata cafes, before donning fez and frock coat to convene at Dolmabahce Palace. Adaptation in the 20th century. World War I and the empire's dissolution transformed coffeehouse culture. In Republican Turkey, Ataturk championed westernization. Coffeehouses were pressured to add tea and western pastries, yet traditional coffeehouses persisted as bastions of old Istanbul. One-room shisha pipes, backgammon tables, and walls lined with sepia photographs of Ottoman sultans and coffee masters. By mid-20th century, television threatened the coffeehouse's role as communal gathering. In response, many added television sets blinking black and white news flicker to draw patrons. The ritual of slow coffee, however, survived. Cess pots manufactured in Üsküdar continued delivering foam-topped brews to neighborhoods, a reflection on coffee's cultural power today. Global coffee culture nods to Ottoman origins with Turkish coffee on United Nations Intangible Cultural Heritage List. UNESCO recognizes the meticulous grind, the Sessfest copper sheen, and the Demetos's ritual as more than beverage, their symbol of hospitality, conversation, and cultural exchange. Tourists flock to historic Coffeehouse in Karachi, sipping foam-heavy cups amid vaulted ceilings painted by craftsmen descended from those 16th-century masters. Backgammon boards bear hand-carved mother of pearl, and serve as still time each brew by the Sultan's old hourglass markers. Closing thought as you cradle your cool cup. Pondering distant Yemeni highlands and Viennese salons, consider how a humble bean spurred hidden revolutions. Social networks that bridged faiths, political debates kindled in scented smoke-filled rooms, and global commerce rewoven by Arab Ottoman traders. The Coffeehouse endures not merely as coffeehouse but as testament to the quiet power of shared ritual to shape civilizations. One steaming sip at a time. Imagine descending from the cacophony of horse-drawn omnibuses and clanging streetcars into the dim glow of an electric lantern in Lower Manhattan circa 1904, beneath Cortlandt Street. A worker ignites a cluster of acetylene lamps, revealing timber-braced caverns carved out of soft Manhattan schist. The thunder of steam-powered drills, echoes of brick archways, and the earth smells faintly of coal smoke and wet stone. You have stepped into the first operational line of New York City's ambitious interborough rapid transit IRT subway, a project poised to reshape the city's daily life and skyline. From overcrowded streets to underground vision, by the late 19th century, New York's surface transit groaned under the weight of nearly 3 million residents. Elevated L's rattled above narrow avenues. Omnibuses crawled through congested thoroughfares. Commuters could spend hours inching from Manhattan's industrial waterfront to brownstone suburbs in Brooklyn or Harlem. City planners, inspired by London's deep level tubes and Paris's Metropolitan, proposed an electrified underground network in 1894. The New York State Legislature chartered the Rapid Transit Commission to survey routes connecting City Hall to the developing Upper West Side. Chief engineer William Barclay Parsons, trained at École des Ponts et Chaussées in Paris, devised a plan. 12 miles of single-deck subway running beneath Broadway and Westchester Avenue, with connecting branches to Brooklyn via the Manhattan Bridge. Engineering the first tunnel at 96th Street. Workers began sinking the first shaft, a 50-foot deep caisson braced by steel rings. Compressed hair techniques prevented water and sand infiltration as they excavated through river-deposited clay. Mules hauled out spoiled cars. Laborers wielded pickaxes under arc lamps powered by portable generators. Bricklayers followed, constructing 4-foot-thick tunnels lined with Dutch-made glazed tiles, their pale cream finish chosen both for brightness and ease of graffiti removal. As the tunnel stretched southward, crews navigated beneath existing building foundations and the old Morningstar well. Pressurized air shifts occasionally caused the bends among workers. Portable decompression chambers were erected at shaft entrances. By 1900, track layers laid 60-pound steel rails atop heavy wooden ties, and overhead trolley wires carried 600-volt DC current from nearby generating stations. Stations as civic temples, the IRT's inaugural station, City Hall, Brooklyn Bridge, and 14th Street were designed as grand public spaces. Headhouse entrances featured rotund railings and glazed terracotta facades inside. Vaulted ceilings soared above marble platforms. Skylights admitted sunlight. Mosaic friezes depicted allegories of commerce and speed. Sculptor Carl Bitter's plaster relief winged eagles clutching lightning bolts adorned ticket booths, evoking a sense of progress and modernity. Station masters, in crisp uniforms and peaked caps, directed crowds through ornate newsboys hawked morning papers. Coffee vendors wheeled carts of steaming cups. Pinstriped bankers consulted pocket watches to ensure the 9:15 express pulled out on schedule. Below, the subway's rhythmic rumble became a metronome for city life, a guiding pulse for factory whistles, school bells, and workday routines. As the third car's brakes hiss open at Bowling Green, stepping into the sunlight feels like emerging from another world. Yet that world, an engineered vein of brick and steel, has already woven itself into New York's fabric, allowing the city to expand northward and densify around elegant hubs, rapid extensions, and intercompany rivalry. By 1906, the success of the IRT's first line spurred a frenzy of expansion. Parsons's engineers laid plans for an additional 100 miles of track looping downtown, threading into Brooklyn and pushing uptown to 221st Street in Washington Heights. Yet the city's transit future was not a single company's to claim. The Brooklyn Rapid Transit BRT soared its own tunnels beneath Flatbush Avenue, while the Brooklyn Manhattan Transit BMTI'd lines under Atlantic Avenue and the Williamsburg Bridge. Fierce competition erupted over route rights, fare divisions, and interchange stations dotted the Wentworth Street junction in Lower Manhattan. IRT and BRT crews literally raced to carve intersecting tunnels. Innovative cut-and-cover methods gave way to deeper shield-driven bores under active waterways like the Gowanus Canal. Municipal courts arbitrated disputes. One suit contested brick thickness at intersecting tunnels, arguing structural integrity favored IRT standards. Another claimed BRT's bridge connection impinged on streetlight franchises. The city's Rapid Transit Commission soon renamed the Board of Rapid Transit Railroad. Commissioners became an increasingly powerful mediator, pushing standardization of third rail voltage signaling protocols and emergency procedures across companies. The sociology of underground life as new stations sprouted. Ridership soared from 150,000 daily riders in 1904 to over 600,000 by 1910. The subway democratized urban mobility. Garment workers from the Lower East Side could commute to factories in Midtown. Affluent Fifth Avenue shoppers relocated to spacious apartments in the Bronx. Immigrants found rapid access to job fairs in Long Island City. The lines blurred class divides, though social etiquette persisted. Streetcar conductors and elevator operators abstained from traveling in the filthy subway, while bank clerks read financial tabloids by lamplight beneath the city. Within the tunnels, a unique subculture emerged. Platform musicians, violinists, pianists, and boasted accordion virtuosos serenaded commuters for coins. Key choppers practiced rapid typographical clatter on discarded Remington typewriters, drafting letters as their riders disembarked at Chambers Street. Newsstands inside mezzanine corridors sold postcards depicting steam locomotives emerging from rock. Face Caesar, romantic echo of America's frontier spirit underground. Yet, tensions simmered. Peak hour crowds tested station capacities, leading to crush incidents. In December 1908, a delayed express at 23rd Street caused a chain reaction queue that injured over 30 commuters, a grim reminder that mechanical ingenuity required human-centered design. In response, the IRT introduced pneumatic platform gates, steel barriers that opened only when trains docked, though pilot programs at Times Square never fully realized due to cost and maintenance concerns. Signal systems and safety in rapid expansion strained early semaphore signals and manual block systems to avert collisions in dark tunnels. Engineers developed an automatic tripcock mechanism by 1909. A lever beneath each train engaged a track-mounted valve if passing a red signal, triggering emergency brakes. Simultaneously, the New York board mandated color light signals controlled by electromechanical relays. An innovation imported from Berlin's U-band. Test runs of the new cab signal system installed illuminated route indicators in motormen's cabs, reducing reliance on line-of-sight signals. Track circuits detected train presence, automatically locking adjacent signals to ensuring safe intervals. These developments required extensive rewiring in existing tunnels and rebuilding of interlock towers above ground. In 1911, an official report praised these measures, crediting them for a 40% reduction in delay-related accidents. The Great Merge. Unification under public control despite technical strides. Intercompany rivalry hindered coherent service. Calls for unified management culling public ownership models in Toronto and London grew louder. Labor strikes in 1913, where motormen and conductors demanded standardized wages and shorter shifts, crippled IRT and BRT differently, exposing system fragility. In 1913, New York's legislature passed the dual contracts, cementing partnerships between the city and private operators. The agreements granted companies 50-year leases on existing lines, in exchange for constructing additional routes including the Broadway 7th Avenue line and the Lexington Avenue line, while the city funded fare-controlled expansion. A quasi-public board oversaw maintenance standards, fare policy capped at 5 cents, and coordinated schedules. Under these contracts, tunnel bores extended into Queens via the Steinway Tunnel beneath the East River, an engineering marvel, requiring pressurized shafts and gas-laden rock straightened into the Bronx via trestles over Westchester Creek. By 1920, New York's subway network spanned over 200 miles, with more than 150 stations, intertwining boroughs with unprecedented speed and reliability. Cultural resonance and the subway's symbolism. The subway's growing presence permeated literature, art, and public imagination. In John Dos Passis's Manhattan Transfer in 1925, the tunnels stand as arteries of modern life, where the city's heartbeat echoed off steel rails. Photographer Bernice Abbott captured ghostly images of empty platforms at dawn, evoking solitude beneath the mass of urban hustle. Jazz musicians referred to rhythm patterns as subway syncopation, a nod to the train's chug and whistle. Public murals commissioned in station lobbies depicted scenes of subway construction, navvies swinging pickaxes, engineers scrutinizing blueprints highlighting the human grit behind the infrastructure. Annual subway appreciation days in the 1920s invited commuters to meet underground staff, tour signal rooms, and attend lectures on tunnel geology. These events fostered civic pride. The subway was not merely a conduit, but a modern marvel embodying New York's dynamism. Unresolved question yet, even as turnstiles clicked and trains roared ever more frequently. deep challenges persisted. How would the aging system handle the influx of automobiles and suburbanization after World War II? Could purely steel and concrete tunnels adapt to new demands for air conditioning, wheelchair access, and digital signaling? And as the city grappled with fiscal crises, would the subway's engineers and custodians preserve Bazalgette-inspired innovation, or would the network face decay beneath rising tides of neglect? As you step off the train at a shadowed local station on the Bronx line, its narrow benches worn smooth by decades of waiting, ponder this: beneath the unceasing rush of modern life, what stories lie silent in the brick arches, and how might these subterranean passages shape the city's next century? From steam to electric post-war overhauls by the 1940s, New York's subway, once gleaming under gaslight, faced wartime strains. Coal shortages hobbled nearby power plants, curbing train frequency. Bomb-resistant air raid shelters repurposed some deep stations during the Blitz moral support drives. After the war, the Board of Transportation launched a massive program, installing high-efficiency rotary converters and replacing aging DC third rails with upgraded 750-volt lines insulated against corrosion. Simultaneously, 1920s mosaic tile stations, once unblemished, now bore grime and chipped surfaces. In 1950, the city allocated funds for station modernization, replacing incandescent bulbs with fluorescent fixtures set behind frosted glass panels, widening platforms where viaducts allowed, and automating token booths with electric turnstiles clicking away human toll collectors. Air conditioning and accessibility. Summer 1957 brought record heat in the collapse of several subway fans. Commuters sweltered in unventilated tunnels. Heat stroke cases spiked. The Transit Authority responded by retrofitting select express cars with window-mounted escalators, then introducing the first C-type air-chill cars in 1960, featuring insulated roofs and mid-car ductwork delivering cooled air from rooftop chillers. Yet stations remained stifling. Beginning in 1964, pilot programs installed industrial ceiling fans in mezzanines and platform edges. By the 1970s, a handful of new stations like World Trade Center's Path Link featured full air conditioning, setting a standard for subsequent deep tunnel projects. Accessibility emerged late. Following the 1968 Architectural Barriers Act, ramps and wheelchair lifts appeared at major hubs. Times Square in 1973, 125th Street in 1978, though true elevator retrofits proved costly and slow. Advocates argued that the subway's unyielding staircases underscored broader inequities in urban mobility, decline and renewal during fiscal crisis. The 1970s fiscal crisis nearly toppled the system. Deferred maintenance left tracks warped, signals malfunctioning, and graffiti covering rolling stock. Riders encountered ghost trains disappearing mid-tunnel and sawtooth schedules. Yet this period also sparked grassroots efforts. Adopt-a-Station campaigns saw local nonprofits cleaning murals and installing public access libraries in stairwells. In 1981, the Metropolitan Transportation Authority (MTA) launched the Fast Forward program, a 20-year plan to rebuild track beds, install microprocessor-based signaling, the first rudimentary CBTC tests, and introduce stainless steel R62 cars resistant to corrosion and graffiti. Station art programs commissioned new mosaics invoking the original 1904 motifs to rekindle civic pride. 21st century innovations and climate resilience in the new millennium. Sustainability and technology drive redevelopment. Communications-based train control (CBTC) phased rollout on the L and 7 lines since 2012, enabling 10-second headways, nearly double past capacity. Platform screen doors, pilot installations at 2nd Avenue subway stations, reduced track fires, suicides, and heat and summer. Flood mitigation. Post-Hurricane Sandy, retractable floodgates at tunnel portals on the East River lines and submersible pumps in low-lying stations protect against storm surges. Contactless fare and real-time apps. OMNY Tap and Go stations and MTAs. Live train mobile displays restore the transparency once celebrated in early signal rooms. Continuity and community. As you ride a CBTC-controlled express beneath Roosevelt Island, its plaza view, now unobstructed by steaming grates, reflect on the echoes of William Parsons's earth-trembling drills. Each advancement, from brick-lined tunnels to digital control centers, rests on layers of innovation, public will, and the enduring commitment of maintenance crews working in the dark. The New York City subway, from its modest 1904 beginnings to its sprawling modern grid, remains a testament to urban resilience. Through fiscal turmoil, war, and climate threats, it carries millions daily, anchoring livelihoods, neighborhoods, and the city's global pulse. May the next time you hear the hiss of brakes at an underground station, you remember the human will that carved these subterranean corridors, and consider how today's challenges will shape the rails of tomorrow. Imagine it's 1750. You're setting out from London's Holborn conduit along a muddy lane toward Birmingham. Your carriage's wheels clatter over rutted cart tracks, sinking thigh-deep in clay churned by endless ox-drawn wagons. Rain has turned roadside ditches into stagnant ponds. and the nightly coaching inn you hope to reach may lie 12 hours away, if you can avoid overturned carriages and highwaymen ambushes in the gloom. Across Britain, this was the norm. Roman roads lay neglected. Parish overseers patched local lanes with little coordination. Landowners cared little for routes crossing distant estates. As commerce boomed, textiles from Manchester, coal from Newcastle, overseas imports coming by sea, Britain's precarious highways strangled economic growth. Merchants faced journey times that doubled in winter. Perishable goods spoiled. Postal coaches drifted late. Armies marched unevenly. Travelers endured broken springs and sickness from jolting wheels. Parliament's First Turnpike Act 1663 early. Attempts to remedy conditions fell to local parishes, whose boundary-defined duties left long routes neglected. In 1663, Parliament passed Britain's first turnpike law, authorizing trustees to erect a gate pike and collect tolls on the Great North Road. Between Wade's Mill and St. Albans, trustees, local gentlemen landowners, used proceeds to hire road menders, buy gravel and lime, and maintain drainage, though modest. This pilot demonstrated that a ring-fenced toll revenue could sustain road upkeep beyond parochial whims. Provincial proliferation by 1720. Economic imperatives drove a wave of turnpike acts, an average of 8 new trusts each year. Trustees were often prominent local figures, justices of the peace, mill owners, innkeepers elected at vestry meetings. They published schedules of toll rates. A coach and four perhaps paid 4p per mile. A laden pack horse, a halfpenny. Exemptions were carefully carved. Foot passengers, local cartage and parish carts on market days often passed free. Each trust appointed salaried surveyors, road menders, and gatekeepers in exchange for shares in the trust stock. Organizational structure and early challenges. Turnpike trusts operated as quasi. They issued bonds and annuities to raise capital for major road projects, turning rutted tracks into graveled, cambered surfaces. Trustees met quarterly to review accounts, deliberate new gates, and adjust tolls for inflation or repair backlogs. Yet disputes abounded. Farmers argued that tolls threatened their livelihoods. Smugglers dismantled gates under cover of night. Surveyors skimped on drainage, causing rapid potholes. To enforce toll collection, trustees employed constables with warrants empowered to seize horses or impound carriages for non-payment. In 1760, Parliament granted trustees powers to pursue defaulters through local magistrates, streamlining dispute resolution but also sparking protests in rural parishes where tolls exceeded perceived benefits. Engineering innovations began. Early turnpikes improved surfaces by importing crushed limestone macadam, a technique popularized by Scottish engineer John Loudon Macadam. By 1820, many turnpikes boasted layered roadbeds, large stones at the base, smaller gravel above, topped with fine screenings to shed water. Surveyors adjusted gradients and introduced embankments to avoid boggy hollows, while roadside ditches diverted rainwater. Toll houses, whitewashed cottages with bay windows, sprouted every 8 to 12 miles, staffed day and night. These improvements halved journey times on major arteries. A London-Manchester coach could now cover 180 miles in 24 hours, rather than the former 48. Trade between industrial towns accelerated. Mail coaches introduced scheduled services. Stagecoach companies thrived. Turnpikes thus transformed Britain's mobility and knit regional economies closer together. Unresolved question yet, as the 1820s dawned, whispers arose that turnpikes funded by debt and vulnerable to toll avoidance would face competition from railways. Would these aging trusts adapt, merge, or fade? And how would the social fabric woven by coaching inns and roadside communities endure the iron horse's advance? As you pause at a granite milepost, its Roman numerals showing 84 miles to London, consider that beneath the rut and gravel lie both triumphs of local cooperation and seeds of obsolescence, awaiting the next chapter in Britain's transport revolution. The mechanics of maintenance and toll collection. By 1780, over 1,000 turnpike trusts governed some 20,000 miles of British roads. Each trust operated much like a small corporation. Trustees and governance, local magistrates and landowners sat as unpaid trustees. Quarterly meetings in candlelit toll booths reviewed ledgers, toll receipts, repair invoices, and debt service on borrowed capital. They levied new toll gates, each requiring an act of Parliament, and adjusted rates to match repair backlogs or inflation. A delicate balance to avoid traveller revolt. Labor and materials. Permanent gangs of roadmen led by a salaried surveyor patched potholes with locally quarried stone and macadam surfacing. In winter, teams wielded horse-drawn scrapers to clear snow and mud. Lime kilns near major routes provided binding agents, while tradesmen produced sturdy wrought iron gates and mortise. Jointed tollhouse windows. Tollhouses and gatekeepers. At each gatehouse, often an L-shaped cottage with thick walls and bay windows. Gatekeepers kept meticulous daybooks. Travelers paid based on vehicle wheel spacing and cargo. A 6-horse mail coach might pay 6 shillings for an 18-mile stretch, while a humble donkey cart owed a few pence. Sundays and market days often carried reduced or waived tolls to support local commerce. Economic and social transformations. The Turnpike Revolution reshaped rural Britain. Market access. Farmers accessed larger urban markets. Perishable dairy and garden produce arrived fresher in Liverpool or Bristol, fetching higher prices. Conversely, industrial goods flowed inward. Iron tools, coarser textiles, and pottery became staples on remote highland routes. Coaching inns and villages. New roadside inns designed with deep coachyards and stables for dozens of horses sprang up every 8 miles. Towns like Leominster and Burton-on-Trent doubled their inns between 1760 and 1800. These hubs supported blacksmiths, farriers, wheelwrights, and victuallers, creating mini-economies directly tied to turnpike traffic. Social mobility. Stagecoach travel. Once the preserve of the gentry became affordable to prosperous merchants and skilled artisans. A silk trader's apprentice could journey 50 miles overnight for less than a week's wages, broadening horizons and business opportunities. Yet, rural laborers bristled at tolls on carts carrying fuel or grain. Shunpiking. Taking longer parish backroads became common. Some parishes erected countergates on minor lanes to intercept toll dodgers, igniting local feuds and legal battles adjudicated at assize courts. The first signs of railway competition by 1825. George Stephenson's Stockton and Darlington Railway and the Liverpool and Manchester Railway demonstrated steam traction's promise. Investors eyed turnpike receipts warily. Fixed toll rates limited revenue growth, while railways offered dividends tied to traffic volume. In 1830, the Liverpool and Manchester line slashed bulk freight charges below grain cart tolls, drawing coal and textile shipments from roads onto rails. Turnpike trusts responded with rate wars, lowering tolls for heavy wagons, but their fixed debt obligations hampered flexibility. Parliamentary committees began debating the future of road funding. Should tolls give way to locally assessed rates or a national road board? Unresolved question as the new steam engines steamed through once busy coaching routes. You posit a dilapidated toll house, its shuttered windows and cracked plaster, a testament to shifting fortunes. Will Britain's patchwork of trusts adapt through consolidation and public funding? Or will the iron roads render them obsolete, leaving their gravel-strewn legacies buried beneath cinders and coal dust? Financial strain and legislative reforms. By the 1840s, Britain's turnpike trusts faced mounting fiscal pressures. Many trusts had borrowed heavily, issuing bonds to finance macadamist, surfacing and new bridges, and now struggled to service interest payments amid declining toll revenues. Annual reports revealed that some trusts spent 2/3 of their income on debt, leaving little for routine maintenance. Shortages of skilled roadmen compounded the problem. Wages rose with industrial demand, diverting labor to burgeoning factories and rail yards, recognizing the system's fragility. Parliament enacted the Turnpike Act's Consolidation Act of 1845, authorizing mergers of small trusts into larger districts. These boards held wider taxing powers, able to levy local poor rate supplements for rural roads. But accountability weakened as trustees expanded beyond parish boundaries. By 1850, over 800 trusts had consolidated into 50 unified boards. Yet mergers proved a temporary bomb. As railways siphoned away long-distance traffic, toll income continued to fall. The Railway Clauses Consolidation Act of 1845 had stipulated that rail companies compensate turnpike trusts for lost revenue. Initially, generous payments arrived, but by the late 1850s, rail companies, under legislative pressure to reduce costs, negotiated settlements that averaged only a fraction of anticipated losses. Many boards found themselves with dilapidated roads, bond, interest unpaid, no statutory mechanism for raising more funds. The final abolition of turnpikes, the pivotal moment, came with the Local Government Act of 1888, which created elected county councils responsible for highways. These new councils absorbed remaining turnpike trusts, taking on both their assets and debts. Overnight, toll gates were dismantled, toll houses sold or repurposed as cottages, pubs, or ironically post offices. The last recorded toll gates fell in 1895 on the Bath Warminster Road, closing an era of century-old road financing. County surveyors, now salaried civil servants rather than local trustees, inherited road networks requiring urgent repair. Funding shifted to council rates and national grants. Attention turned from discouraging evasion to efficient maintenance. Macadam's surfaces gave way to tar-bound tarmac by the 1920s, reflecting technological progress beyond the gravel methods once championed by macadam and turnpike surveyors. The physical and cultural legacy. Though the trusts vanished, their imprint remains etched in Britain's geography, infrastructure, and local identity. Road alignments. Many modern A and B roads follow original turnpike routes. The A5, for example, largely traces the old Holyhead Road turnpiked in 1815 to connect London with the Irish Mail Packet Port. Stone mileposts bearing mileage to London in Roman numerals still stand at intervals, silent witnesses to journeys once measured at walking pace. Tollhouse architecture. Belmont Tollhouse near Burton-on-Trent retains its distinctive flared eaves and octagonal bay window. Now a private residence, it echoes the gatekeeper's vigilance. Elsewhere, former toll cottages adorned country lanes' pebble-dash walls, arched doorways, and narrow shuttered windows, reminders of the roadside economy that served travelers with ale, lodgings, and ferries for river crossings. Place names and folklore of villages, like Toll End in the Black Country and Gateforth in Yorkshire, derive their names from prominent turnpike gates. Local legends speak of toll ferries, who blessed drivers on foggy nights, or of wicked toll keepers who overcharged unwary drovers. Annual festivals sometimes reenact the gates opening, villagers in smocks and breeches tolling. The bell and waving parish maps as playful homage. Coaching inns, buildings like the Swan and Slipper in Buckinghamshire, still display stabling arches, wide enough for four-in-hand coaches. Some inns maintain museum rooms showcasing harnesses, coach lamps, and original toll tokens found buried in stable floors, a tangible link to a time when horse and cart were lifelines of commerce. Reflection, market forces, and infrastructure innovation. The turnpike trusts illustrate a broader pattern. Infrastructure provision balanced between private initiative and public oversight. Initially, local entrepreneurship via toll-funded, rapid road improvement where parishes and counties lacked resources. Trustees answered to local stakeholders, ensuring responsiveness to immediate needs. Yet their reliance on fixed toll rates and debt financing left them ill-prepared for disruptive innovations. In this case, railways. As steam replaced stirrup, Britain's transportation priorities shifted. The turnpike's collapse under railway competition presaged similar transitions across the Industrial Revolution. Canals supplanted by rail by road in the automobile age. Their demise underscores the need for adaptable funding models and governance structures that can respond to technological change. The modern road funding debated at motorway toll roads in the UK remain rare, largely replaced by fuel taxes, VEHICLE, licensing fees, and general taxation funding highways. Yet the spirit of the turnpikes persists in public-private partnerships, PPPs, for road construction, with modern trusts issuing bonds repaid through shadow tolls based on traffic volume. Critics argue such schemes risk replicating 19th-century pitfalls: long-term debt, fare avoidance in the form of toll evasion, and shifting burdens from users to taxpayers. In areas like Kent and Devon, community groups advocate reopening some road tolls to fund local maintenance, echoing the original ethos that direct user fees ensure well-maintained roads. Opponents warn of regressive impacts on rural drivers and small businesses, concerns first voiced by Georgian farmers whose carts were impounded for toll evasion. The debate continues. Should road users pay directly, or should society underwrite transport networks collectively? Concluding thoughts as you drive or perhaps cycle along a sunlit stretch of the old Great North Road, now the B6163. Consider the hands that laid its foundation. Parochial trustees poring over ledgers by candlelight, navvies wielding shovels in muddy hollows, gatekeepers waving travelers forward at dawn. Their turnpike experiment forged Britain's first coordinated road network, enabling the flow of goods, people, and ideas that powered the Industrial Revolution. Although the turnpike trusts faded, they bequeathed an enduring lesson: infrastructure thrives when it combines local initiative with strategic vision, when it finances upkeep sustainably, and when it remains flexible in the face of innovation. Whenever you pass a solitary milepost or pass through a repurposed toll house, envision the toll coin slipping through iron bars, an echo of centuries past, reminding us that the roads beneath our wheels carry not only wheels and feet but centuries of human enterprise. Imagine standing on the wide expanse of the Mongolian steppe around the year 1220. The grass ripples green and gold beneath a wind-swept sky. In the distance, a solitary rider approaches at full gallop, saddlebags clinking, dust trailing like a comet's tail. Within hours he will vanish beyond the horizon, bound for Karakoram, the nascent Mongol capital. He is a Yam messenger, part of a vast relay system that carries orders and intelligence across more than 5,000 miles of Asian imperial network, unprecedented in scale. Genghis Khan's vision of speed and control. When Temujin rose as Genghis Khan in 1206, he inherited nomadic tribes accustomed to rapid mounted raids but lacking centralized logistics to unite the disparate Mongol clans and govern newly conquered territories. From China's forests to Persia's deserts, he needed reliable communication faster than any enemy force or rumor mill. Drawing on the old Turkic Epshi couriers, Temujin ordered the establishment of Yam stations, relay posts, every 25 to 30 miles a day's easy ride for a Mongol horse. Each station or talk provided fresh mounts, food, and shelter, ensuring that messages written on wooden slips or transmitted verbally could leapfrog across the continent at astonishing speeds. Establishing the relay chains, veteran scouts rode ahead to identify ideal station locations, near oases or water sources in the Gobi. Beside spring-fed springs in Central Asia, atop windswept passes in the Altai, they marked trails with touchstones, wooden posts carved, with a conceal and mileage to the next station. Construction commenced swiftly. Simple gear-yurt tents for lodging, corrals for dozen-horse remounts, stockpiles of dried meat, cheese, and fermented mare's milk airag to invigorate riders. A typical ortok housed 5 to 10 remount horses, selected for endurance and speed. To courier guards, armed and skilled in horseback archery, ensuring security against bandits. One station master, responsible for inventory logs and record-keeping in Uyghur script. Local herders and laborers, tasked with feeding and grooming horses and maintaining supplies. By 1215, over 10,000 stations ringed the Mongol sphere from the Hulenburg grasslands to the Caspian shores. Every conquered fief and tributary regime was compelled to fund and staff the local yam, integrating imperial logistics with regional economies. Communication methods and security messages traveled by 3 primary methods: written dispatches, short wooden tablets inscribed with syllabic runes, enclosed in sealed leather pouches to prevent tampering; verbal orders for urgent commands. Horseback runners memorized speeches word for word, delivering them directly to regional governors. Caravan coordination, merchants carrying official passports. Paisi allowed safe passage with goods and news. Packets between stations. Each horseman carried 2 identification tokens, a gilded Paisi pendulum and an armband bearing the Great Khan's emblem. Checkpoints recognized these instantly. Refusals to relay or deliberate delays risked execution. The Yam's early operations and impact. In 1223, when Subbatai prepared the western invasion against the Khwarezmian Empire, he dispatched couriers who covered 400 miles in 48 hours. Their reports reached Gadai Khan in Karakoram within a wicked travel time that no European or Islamic courier could match. By the time Bata Khan's forces approached the Volga in 1236, adjacent Rus princes heard the distant thunder of Mongol horses not as rumor, but as intelligence validated by Yam reports. Such speed enabled coordinated multi-front assaults. Generals could synchronize attacks across deserts and mountains. Emergency relief. Khan's orders for resupply or medical teams reached besieged garrisons before food stocks dwindled. Diplomatic messaging. Envoys from China and Persia negotiated treaties via the same network, sharing scientific knowledge in astronomy and medicine. Unresolved thoughts as you watch the Yam rider vanish into the steppe at a cracking gallop. Consider this. How did an impermanent network of tents and nomadic horses create an empire more connected than many settled realms? And what vulnerabilities lay hidden when one station's supplies dwindled or harsh winter snows blocked the trail? In our next section, we will delve deeper into the Yam's golden age, its administrative code, everyday challenges, and the genius that allowed a horse-borne empire to hold sway from Seoul to Baghdad. Imperial oversight and the Yam regulations. By 1225, the Yam network had crystallized into a formal institution under the Great Khan's secretariat. Kublai, then a young prince, drafted the Yam Code, a concise set of regulations ensuring uniformity across thousands of miles. Station standards. Each ortak must maintain at least 8 remount horses, housed in shelters with raised wooden floors to keep hooves dry. A stockpile of 10 days' rations, dried meat, curds, airag, barley preserved in skin sacks treated with birch tar to repel insects. A spring or well within 500 paces. Where lacking, canal chests filled with weekly supplies of fresh water. Personnel duties. Station Master Yamchi kept detailed ledgers of dispatched and arriving couriers, Paisi issued, and maintenance logs. Courier guards rotated shifts to ensure 24-hour coverage. Each bore a saber and composite bow for defense. Herdsmen and groomers, tasked with feeding up to 20 pounds of forage daily, cleaning stables, and monitoring horse health. Passport. Paisi protocol. 2-part tokens. 1 small wooden pendant carried by the rider. 1 metal badge kept at the station. On arrival, station masters recorded the rider's arrival time. Delays incurred excise fines. False Paisi led to immediate imprisonment. Communication hierarchy. Secret dispatch Nihuchi, carried only by senior Yamchi, encrypted via Mongol cipher for sensitive military orders. General relay caution, used for everyday administrative messages. These regulations were enforced by periodic inspections. Envoys from Karakoram, members of the Imperial Khan's Guard, rode clandestinely along remote routes to audit station logs and test Paisi authenticity. Failure to comply invited severe penalties. Demotion of station masters, confiscation of local fiefs, even execution for collusion with bandits. A day in the life of a Yam station. At dawn, the station stirs you at stakes hammered into frozen earth heard the first hoofbeats as riders from the previous night's shift galloped in. Their arrival signaled immediate transfer. Couriers dismounted, handed sealed dispatch cases to fresh guards, and joined the waiting remount line. Each horse received a brisk rub-down with coarse straw to clear sweat and dust before saddling inside. The yurt's central hearth, fuel fires, smoked clay pots of airag and goat stew for arriving travelers. Women from nearby camps, often wives of herdsmen, served bowls of thick millet porridge and round flatbreads baked on iron griddles. Over these simple meals, riders compared the condition of trails. Reports of flooded fords, wolf packs sighted near camp, or the threat of raiding Turkmen clans. By mid-morning, station masters recorded each departure in ink made from soot and camel fat binder, scrubbing quills on sandstone slabs. They noted distances to next stations, typically 25 miles apart, and estimated ride times based on terrain, open steppe versus the rocky spurs of the Altai range. As afternoon sun baked the tents, herdsmen grazed remount horses on adjacent pastures, shifting stock between grazing areas to prevent overgrazing. Groomers inspected each animal for sores or lameness critical, since a crippled horse could delay entire convoys. Any illnesses triggered the imperial equine surgeon, a roving vet trained in Tibetan veterinary medicine who carried poultices of medicinal herbs and leeches to draw out infection. Logistical and environmental trials. Despite meticulous organization, the Yam faced relentless challenges. Harsh climates in summer, black blistering dust choked the stations. In winter, snowdrifts buried tents under 2 feet, and temperatures plunged below -30°C. Frozen water tanks cracked. Station masters preemptively carved ice blocks into buckets, melting them over simmering coals. Riders layered felt garments and leather boots stuffed with sheep's wool. Yet frostbite remained a constant hazard. Records show annual losses of up to 5% of fresh remount stock in Siberian routes. Banditry and security. Remote stations became tempting targets for marauding tribes. To counter this, the Khan authorized Yam patrols, small armed contingents that circled station perimeters at dawn and dusk. Watchtowers fashioned from stacked rock offered elevated vantage points. Dusk watchmen lit signal fires as warnings, relayed by mirror flashes at sunrise. In particularly lawless passes, local lords contributed garrison troops to bolster station defense. Supply chain vulnerabilities. Grain and forage shipments via camel caravans could be delayed by sandstorms or river floods. In the Fergana Valley, high water in the Sia Darya often stranded merchant convoys. Station masters then negotiated with local Uzbek Khans for emergency supplies or sourced wild grasses and poplar bark as fodder substitutes. Imperial auditors later noted that up to 10% of station budgets went toward emergency purchases outside standard rations. Linguistic and cultural barriers. As the empire spanned diverse peoples, Persians, Uyghurs, Russian station masters, and courier guards learned rudimentary phrases in multiple tongues. Paisi inscriptions sometimes included Persian and Uyghur script alongside Mongolian runes to aid foreign riders. Special liaison officers fluent in local dialects mediated disputes over grazing rights or Paisi validity. The Yam's strategic importance. By the late 1230s, the Yam network had become the Mongol Empire's central nervous system. Batakhan's envoys traversed from Kipchak to Karakoram in less than 2 weeks. Ogeday's court in Karakoram swiftly dispatched orders to governors in Khwarezm. These communication advantages allowed the Mongols to maintain cohesive command across a realm stretching from the Sea of Japan to the Danube, an achievement unmatched by contemporaneous empires. However, the system's very speed bred overconfidence. During the 1241 European advance, raids into Hungary relied on Yam intelligence for rapid redeployments, but overly ambitious courier missions in winter failed. Horses collapsed en masse, messages stalled, and some detachments perished in blizzards. This foreshadowed limits to the Yam's scalability when stretched beyond Mongolia's Heartla and DS. As dusk descends on this remote steppe station, the last riders rub their weary mounts and seal nightly message pouches in oiled leather satchels. Each stamp of the Khan's wilder, a snow leopard undulating among clouds, promises swift justice and order. Yet deep in your mind lingers a thought. Can such an intricate network dependent on nomadic horses, local supplies, and harsh terrains itself indefinitely? Or would its brilliance dim as the empire's frontiers expanded toward distant oceans and desert wastes? Expansion under Gedai and Kublai Khan. When Genghis Khan died in 1227, his son Gedai inherited the empire, and with it the Yam. Gedi's reign saw further refinement. Stations in North China were rebuilt from wood and fell to brick and tile, reflecting sedentary building traditions. Records from 1234 note the first iron-shod relay horses designed by Han craftsmen whose hardened hooves withstood sharp gravel without injury. Under Kublai Khan R. 1262-1294, the Yam pushed into the Yangtze Delta and the streets of Dadu, modern Beijing, where stations doubled as courier offices and miniature customs checkpoints for goods accompanying official dispatches. Kublai post-route regulations of 1271 extended Paisi privileges to foreign merchants, Persians, Uyghurs, Orthodox envoys, permitting safe conduct across 8 circuits of the empire. These measures fused the nomadic Yam with Chinese imperial courier tradition, a hybrid network carrying both horses and sedan chairs, depending on terrain and climate. Administrative strains and local autonomy. Yet, as the empire's heart shifted south into China, the Yam's centralized discipline loosened. Yuan administrators delegated station upkeep to local prefects, often corrupt or indifferent, who diverted forage to personal stables, forcing couriers to procure supplies at inflated local rates. Imperial inspectors' complaints in the Yuan-Shi lamented staff skimping on rations, leading to underfed horses collapsing mid-relay. In Central Asia, Regional emirs resisted imperial orders to fund yam stations, arguing that local pasture sufficed for seasonal grazing. During the 1280s, when Chagatai Khanate authority waxed, some stations outside Inner Mongolia ceased remount provisions entirely, leaving couriers to rely on private caravans. These fractures foreshadowed broader fissures in Mongol unity, where once a uniform paisi guaranteed service, now riders carried supplementary cash or gifts to coax remounts, undermining the egalitarian spirit. Genghis had intended decline under the Ming and Ilkhanate transitions following Kublai's death. The Yuan dynasty faltered. In 1368, Ming rebels drove the Mongols north, repurposing southern relay stations for the Ming post-horse system Yisbu. But the Ming rulers streamlined routes focusing on grain transport and census, reporting rather than battlefield communications. Many former yam station masters became Ming postal clerks, their yurt-born expertise channeled into administrative precincts. Elsewhere, the Ilkhanate in Persia and the Golden Horde in Russia inherited yam segments. In Persia, Hulagu's successors maintained stations purely for tax collection, stalling riders at checkpoints to inspect caravan cargoes. The efficient Mongol relay gave way to customs duties and bribe networks. By 1350, Ilkhanate couriers reported delays of 2 days per station, multiplying dispatch times beyond Genghis's original expectations. Cultural resonance and written memory despite administrative decay. The yam lingered in memory and literature. The 14th century Book of the Marvels of the World by Rashid al-Din recounts tales of spies sent on secret missions via the yam, highlighting its role in diplomatic intrigue. In China, Yuan poet Gao Qi penned verses lamenting lost speed, where once swift riders cleft the wind, now idle gates stand rusted, blind. These elegies underscored nostalgia for a more unified age, when message and order flew faster than the steppe wolf's cry. Enduring infrastructure and the Silk Road revived. Ironically, as the Mongol Empire fragmented, Europe's demand for silk and spices surged via the very routes the yam had serviced. Italian traders in the late 14th century, Venetian Marco Polo's successors, esteemed former yam stations as caravanserai's safe havens stocked with grain, fodder, and fresh mounts. Some stations along the Silk Road remained in near-continuous use until the 19th century. Their foundations raised platforms of packed earth visible beneath. Ottoman-style inns in Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan. Archaeological surveys along the Kashgar-Samarkand route have uncovered stone foundations of turnpike-style way stations bearing mile markers in Mongolian ruins. Local villagers still recall tales of subterranean storage vaults once used to hide imperial dispatches that became makeshift wine cellars under Russian colonial administration. Lessons for modern communication networks. The yam foreshadows principles in today's global infrastructure. Relay. Just as the yam depended on stations every 25 to 30 miles, fiber optic networks rely on repeater stations, spaced within signal attenuation limits. Standardization versus local adaptation. Genghis's yam code echoes modern internet protocols' uniform packet formats, while regional adaptations under the Yuan match localized catching strategies and content delivery networks. Funding and governance models. The yam's decline under multi-tiered administration highlights the need for clear accountability in public-private partnerships. Modern courier and logistics giants, for example, DHL, FedEx, maintain proprietary hubs unlike the Mongol model of state-run relay, yet both face similar trade-offs of centralized control versus local agility resilience. Planning. The yam's vulnerability to weather and corruption points to the importance of redundancy and oversight principles guiding modern disaster recovery. Data centers and encrypted diplomatic channels. Concluding. You ride a modern bullet train across the Eurasian land, bridge its high-speed rails echoing. The yam's ancient roots reflect on the vision of a horseborn empire that conquered more than armies. It conquered distance. The Mongol yam stands as both marvel and caution, a network welded by a singular will and discipline, yet susceptible to local divergence and technological shifts in our era of satellites and instantaneous messaging. The yam reminds us that even the fastest systems depend on human hands and horses' hooves. Its legacy endures not merely in caravanserais or colonial roadbeds, but in the timeless lesson that communication is the backbone of cohesion and that the world's greatest empires rise and fall by the speed at which they convey their commands. Imagine stepping into the bustling Cannaregio district of 12th century Venice, where narrow canals run between timber-framed workshops. Here woodcutters unload oak planks from Dalmatian barges. Blacksmiths ring out the pulse of hammer on anvil forging iron nails, and rope spinners twist hemp lines along quayside trestles. You have entered what will become the Venetian first state-owned factory, where the city's famed galleys will be built, maintained and refitted at unprecedented scale. Early shipbuilding in Venice. From the city's founding, Venice relied on small boatyards, quarries scattered along salt canals. Local artisans crafted careline for lagoon travel and merchant cogs for Adriatic trade. But military needs drove innovation. By 1104, after defending against the Byzantine-Norman wars, Venice recognized that ad hoc yards could not support rapid galley production. Doge Ordine for Liros decreed centralized naval construction into a single stretch of canal, granting it autonomy from guild regulations. Laying the foundations, in 1106 Venetian magistrates purchased swampland in eastern Cannaregio, wooden piles into the marsh to support new designed along the Rio di San Lander were. Standardized slipways, cali da nave, were carved. Each slip, 30 meters long, 4 meters wide, and lined with oak beams, allowed a half-constructed galley to rest on rollers before launch. Workshops erected adjacent. Carpenters' roofs louvered to vent sawdust. Rope walks hundreds of meters long stretched alongside for braiding, rigging, and forges housed in iron-reinforced brick hearths. By mid-12th century, the arsenal could turn out to new galleys per month, an output unmatched elsewhere. Venetian patricians funded expansions through a dedicated Gallia Ducali tax, while overseers, known as Saviagli Ordine, managed procurement of timber from Dalmatia and wrought iron from the mainland. Organization and secrecy. The arsenal's true innovation lay in its assembly line precursor. Rather than each shipyard building whole vessels, the arsenal specialized tasks: keel laying by master shipwrights, framing by carpentry crews, hull planking by seasonal laborers, mast shaping by crane operators, and armament installation by artillery smiths. Each team rotated stations, mastering one step before moving an early form of task specialization that cut build times dramatically. To protect state secrets, the arsenal enforced strict access controls. Guards at the single drawbridge scrutinized entrance crests. Skilled workers were sworn to lifelong service, with penalties of exile for divulging methods. Genoese spies roundly reported mysterious floating factories in Venice, whispering of industrial magic behind towering workshop walls. Unresolved thought as you trace the length of a newly laid keel, its timbers planed smooth by water. Source ponder how this concentration of resources, talent, and secrecy would propel Venice to maritime supremacy. And in a city of canals and mass-wreathed carnival, what human dramas unfolded behind these walls where craftsmen toiled sun up to sundown, forging the backbone of an empire. Dawn at the arsenal. Rituals of readiness before sunrise. A low mist clings to the Cannaregio Canal, and the arsenal stirs. The single drawbridge creaks open to admit the first workmen. By 5 a.m. the canals.com surface glitters with torchlight reflections. Guiding barges laden with seasoned oak from Dalmatia to moor at the arsenal's timber wharf. Bellows clamor from smithies already alight, where ironworkers heat ingots for mast hoops and hull fastenings. Inside the great shipyard, master carpenters known as maestri d'opera at the tavoliere, a long planning table drawn on barn boards, their blue-inked diagrams of the next galley stand pinned beneath iron lanterns, detailed cross-sections marking frame spacing every 60 centimeters, keel curvature, and stern ornamentation bearing Venice's winged lion emblem. Each mastri reviews the ducal mandatum, the Doge's written order specifying vessel type, light scouting galley or heavy warship, armament loadout, and target delivery date, division of labor. The arsenal's guild-like regiment. The arsenal lay outside Venice's traditional city guilds. Its internal organization mirrored guild principles except on a grand scale. Laborers fell into 5 distinct tiers: maestri d'opera, master shipwrights, supervise hull construction, train apprentices, resolve design modifications, wear black linen tunics marked with a white cross on the shoulder, maestri, master carpenters shape frames, planking, and decking, oversee wood seasoning and storage, distinguished by leather aprons and iron compass hanging at their belts. IERI artillery smiths and metalworkers, forge nails, mast collars, hinge plates, and cannon muzzles. Maintain forges, test metallurgy, operate in vaulted brick. Workshops near the arsenal gate for ventilation. Cord ERI rope makers work in covered ropewalk sheds stretching 200 meters. Produce 10 kilometers of hemp line per month for rigging and anchor cables. Rotate shifts around a central steam-powered capstan by 1580. Derari and Manavali general laborers and fire tenders. Haul timber, stoke forges, repair tools, clear debris. Seasonal hires from Venetian Laguna villages. Paid in kind bread, cheese, salted fish plus daily wages. 8 soldi. At precisely 9 a.m. a bronze gong sounds, signaling the shift handover. Artillery lay down hot hammers. Carpenter pours chisels. Laborers clean workspaces. At midday, all assemble at communal tables under arcades, wooden benches laden with bowls of fish stew, polenta, and red wine distributed from large clay amp. Straight-faced supervisors dine last, reviewing logs of timber consumption and forge output. The galley assembly line, from keel to launch over the course of 3 weeks. Standard galley da Gehau, approximately 30 meters long with 25 oars per side, progresses through the following tightly choreographed stages. Keel and stem construction. Days 1, 2, 3 to master shipwrights. Hew the main keel from a single oak trunk, supported by sand-filled cradles. The stem and stern post, riven from separate timbers, receive mortise and tenon joints sealed with animal hide glue. Framing and ribbing. Days 4 to 8, carpenters set up molds on the keel. erecting 60 centimeter spaced frames. Each frame is steeped into precise curvature, then knocked to the keel and sternpost. Planking and caulking. Days 9 to 14, whole planks. 220 centimeters wide and 3 centimeters thicker, sewn into place using leather thongs before iron nails secure them. Caulking with oakum and tar follows, making the whole watertight. Decking and interior fittings. Days 15 to 18, deck beams and boarding installed. Cabins for the captain and officers constructed, and rowing benches affixed atop crossbeams. A small forge on board fabricates routine hardware, rigging, armament, and final touches. Days 19 to 21. Rope makers drop lines through deck chutes to prepare for mast stepping. Artillery fits swivel cannons falconetti along the railings. Bronze figureheads of St. Mark's Lion are mounted at the prow. Launch and sea trials. Day 22. Rollers beneath the slipway allow the vessel to slide into the canal at high tide. Mariners board hoist lateen sails on a single mast and rowers give a final pull. The galley coaches under its own steam to the Arsenal Basin, where officials inspect seaworthiness, hull integrity tests, calm water maneuvering drills, and a demonstration of the swivel gun's recoil management. Strategic innovations. Dockyards as arsenal of power beyond pure quantity. Venice's arsenal pioneered strategic advances. Standardized components by the late 13th century. Arsenal engineers produced prefabricated oars, iron anchors, and rudder assemblies in batch run stored in labeled crates for rapid fitting across multiple galleys. This early modularity slashed replacement times and ensured fleets could remain at sea longer. Water-powered machinery under the Council of Ten's 1323 directive. An artificial canal diverting a branch of the nearby Musone River powered water wheels. Driving sawmills. One sawmill could process 100 planks per day. 2 such wheels, installed by 1350, doubled output and minimized manual labor. Hammers in the smithies employed trip hammers to shape larger rudder parts, a mechanization rare in medieval Europe. Naval ordnance integration when cannon technology arrived from the Ottomans in the early 15th century. Arsenal artillery adapted existing brace and bit drills to bore bronze cannon barrels up to 80 centimeters in length. By 1450, Venetian galley broadsides carried 20-pounder bombards integral for Mediterranean sea battles at Lepanto and later engagements. Community impact and civic pride. The arsenal's influence extended beyond military might, employment, and social order at its 16th century peak. The arsenal employed over 16,000 men, nearly one-third of Venice's labor force. Stable wages prevented famines of manpower during peacetime, and pension provisions for disabled laborers marked an early form of social insurance. Urban growth alongside the arsenal. The Arazi district, once marshland, flourished into artisan quarters. Rope merchants, sailmakers, coopers, and canvas dyers all clustered near the arsenal gate. Inns catered to visiting envoys and naval inspectors. Churches like San Pietro di Castello received endowments from Arsenal alms funds, funding chapels dedicated to patron saints of mariners. Cultural legacy. The 16th century painter Jacopo de Parpe captured the arsenal's scale in detailed maps, hand-colored panoramas showing hundreds of vessels docked in parallel rows. These works adorned Venetian palaces today and underscore the arsenal's role as the Serenissimo's beating heart. Unresolved question as evening descends and the last galleys glide into the dock, starlight shimmering on their freshly caulked hulls. One wonders, by centralizing naval production, did Venice risk over-reliance on state structures at the expense of artisan independence? And could this industrial-scale approach withstand changing naval technologies like sailing ships and steam power that lay beyond the horizon? Transition to sailing ships and steam power. By the late 17th century, galley-zored warships built for Mediterranean con began to give way to ship designs powered by sails. The arsenal adapted, its slipways widened to 40 meters, accommodating hulking 3-masted galleoni with oak hulls planked in 30-centimeter timbers. Dockside cranes, once used for masts and catapults, now lifted heavy cargo hatches and early artillery pieces. In 1822, under Austrian rule, the arsenal introduced its first steam engines. A pair of beam engines manufactured in Bohemian ironworks powered a 100-meter covered dry docks hydraulic capstan, hauling newly plated steam frigates into the Grand Canal for fitting of boilers. By mid-century, the arsenal boasted its own foundry for rotor and propeller shafts and a glassworks for marine compasses. Far beyond its humble medieval beginnings, bureaucratic strain and workforce decline. Yet with industrialization came bureaucracy. The arsenal's workforce swelled to 30,000 by 1850, necessitating a new hierarchy: an Austrian military governor, a civilian arsenal director, and a board of naval engineers. Frequent inspections, procurement scandals, and conflicting military and commercial priorities bogged down production. Formerly proud Mastri de Pras saw their autonomy erode under imperial regulations. Apprentices found fewer opportunities as mechanized saws replaced hand tools. By 1880, many artisan families once centered in Cannaregio migrated to Mestre or Trieste, seeking work in rail and steel factories. The arsenal's annual new ship output fell from a peak of 25 sailing warships in the 17th century to just 3 coastal gunboats by 1900. World War upheavals and post-war rebirth during World War I. The arsenal refitted troop transports and repaired Austrian dreadnoughts damaged at the Battle of the Otranto Straits. In World War II, it suffered Allied bombing raids. The glassworks and foundries were reduced to rubble. Post-war Italy's navy lacked funds for full reconstruction. By the 1950s, only a fraction of the workshops remained active, producing spare parts for fishing boats and small ferries. Yet in 1984, a civic movement led by Venice's shipwright Heritage Society convinced the Italian government to restore the historic slipways and rebuild a single-station galleon La Fenice, a floating museum. Traditional artisans were retrained in 16th century carpentry, mosaic tilework, and ropes. Today, La Fenice stands as a living tribute, docked before the entrance gates, its oak hull and lateen sails reminding visitors of the arsenal's origins. Lasting lessons in cultural memory, though no longer a naval powerhouse. The Venetian arsenal pioneered principles that resonate in modern industry. Mass production with craftsmanship, its early assembly line methods predate the Industrial Revolution. Balancing standardization with artisanal skill, a model seen later in automotive plants, and modular shipyards. State-enterprise integration as one of history's first state-owned factories. It demonstrated both the strengths rapid response, centralized investment, and pitfalls bureaucratic inertia, workforce alienation of public operator production, urban and economic synergy. The arsenal's development spurred entire smithies, cooperages mirroring modern economic clusters around technology parks or port-based logistics hubs. Closing reflection. As you wander the restored docks, cobblestones echoing each footstep, consider that what began as a simple concentration of boatyards under a Doge's decree became a global exemplar of shipbuilding innovation. The Venetian arsenal's legacy lives on in every shipyard that manages hundreds of specialized trades under a single roof, in every government-sponsored enterprise balancing strategic needs with skilled labor, and in the very idea that an entire republic once harnessed state power to command the seas. And so, beyond the roar of modern motorboats and gondoliers' songs, the arsenal whispers its centuries-old lesson, that behind every grand fleet lies a network of workshops, canals, and human ingenuity woven together by vision as much as by timber and iron. Imagine the low, gray preyed-on mists hovering over Edo's Sumida River circa 1620. Lantern-toting riverboats drift against the soft current, their hulls laden with burlap sacks. The air carries the sharp temps of fermenting rice and the distant clang of clapper gongs at the Asakusa temples. You step onto the muddy riverbank at Kawaramachi, a stretch of shoreline chosen by shogunal decree as the site for the Tokugawa government's first supervised rice market, a floating exchange that will transform Japan's staple grain from mere sustenance into a commodity governed by price, supply chains, and financial instruments. Centralized control in the shogunate's vision when Tokugawa Ieyasu established Edo as his seat in 1603. The city swelled from a fishing village to the world's largest urban center, eventually surpassing 1 million residents. Supplying all those people with rice, Japan's Gohan posed logistical nightmares. Daimyo domains across the archipelago collected rice as tax, but clearing, transporting, and trading it haphazardly led to scarcity, spoilage, and price volatility. To ensure stable food supplies and pacify potentially restive urban populations, the shogunate created Komyukaba rice distribution stations along the Sumida, with Kawaramachi the foremost. First, rice from Dosan, Shinano, and Ichigo provinces arrived via wooden barges, guided by Tsunayuchi pilots, under the Kyoto Komtoshi regulations. Itenlu by Ishii, every shipment had to offload at Kawaramachi, where Gojbayashi tow collectors measured each koku approximately 180 liters. Rice could then be rebargied to Ido warehouses or immediately auctioned on floating platforms called funabashi. The first auctions, rituals of exchange by 1625, every fortnight in the 5th and 20th days of the lunar month, merchant pilots tugged long poles to position funabashi rafts in neat rows parallel to the riverbank, each raft roughly 10 meters long and 3 meters wide, bore bamboo crates of rice samples carefully displayed for inspection. Buyers, mostly wealthy Chunin townsmen and Hatamoto direct retainers of the shogun, donned lacquered straw hats and padded cotton kimono, calling out bids in measured cadences. Auctioneers wielded small wooden gavel sticks, shaku to signal acceptance, and scribes under silk canopies recorded contract terms on narrow rolls of mulberry paper. Prices varied by origin and quality. Ivory white new rice from inland Ekigo fetched up to 1 kam, a gold coin weighing about 4.5 grams per koku, while older harvests from distant Sanriku provinces sold at steep discounts. Merchants sometimes used rice vouchers, chichi, as promissory notes, enabling speculators to trade rice rights without physical transfer. This embryonic futures market introduced margin payments and deposit requirements, a controlled experiment in financial innovation orchestrated by the shogunate's appointed Tsuchiyamada magistrate. crafting a supply chain behind the auctions. A complex network emerged. Komgishiki rice stewards supervised grading. Heated iron ribbons seared each grain batch to test moisture content. Porcelain dishes served to sample aroma. An expert senmanshi cereal specialists judged textural firmness by hand barges. Once single-purpose vessels were retrofitted with sliding poppy oil lanterns to load and unload at night during rainy seasons, ensuring continuous trade. Complementary trades flourished. Korosho rice brokers underwritten by merchant houses offered advance loans to provincial governors, drawing fees of 3 to 5% on the loaned Kusakaya's sake shops purchased underpriced rice lots to distill into rice wine, converting spoilage risk into profit. Meanwhile, warehouse operators built multi-tiered wooden granaries elevated on stone pillars to deter rodent siege with tagged rice lot numbers corresponding to auction receipts. As the water presses gently against your sandals, sending ripples across lacquered barges, consider how this Kyoto-inspired system of government-regulated auctions, vouchers, and specialized roles turned a rice market into an engine of social control and economic growth. How did the shogunate maintain oversight as speculators tested the bounds of komchichi, and could such tightly managed exchange endure monsoon floods or samurai unrest? By mid-17th century, the Kawaramachi market had settled into a near routine, at first light around the hour called U. Between 5 a.m. and 7 a.m., torch-bearing workmen escorted incoming riverboats to designated unloading slips. Each barge bore its cargo manifest handwritten on rice paper scrolls, sealed with red lacquer listing the lordship of origin, the year's harvest code, and the barometer reading at dispatch to gauge moisture risk. At precisely Hiru no Kachi, the hour of noon value, the funabashi rafts were aligned in numerical order, each identified by a painted wooden placard. Buyers merchants from the Nihon Boshi rice brokers, guild and shogunate grain inspectors wearing straw cloaks boarded the rafts, sampling rice by pouring a handful of polished grains into porcelain bowls, rolling them between thumb and forefinger to judge hardness, then gently crushing a few kernels to assess starch purity. Auctioneers, perched on raised platforms at the riverbank, held curved wooden stirrers mabari to tap rice containers, signaling transitions between lots. Each lot transaction followed a precise choreography. Presentation. Producers, agents spread rice on lacquered trays, cocoa portions for inspection. Sealed bidding. Buyers lifted bamboo fans to signal interest. When few voices hovered, open bidding commenced. Hammer strike. The lead auctioneer tapped the maibari against an iron block. 3 rhythmic raps declaring the highest bid accepted. Contract seal. A clerk stamped the buyer's seal onto scrolls, while the seller's agent nodded and signed with ink made from pine, soot, and rice glue. Deposit exchange. A proportional rice voucher, often 1/10 of the koku, changed hands as guarantee held in the arsenal's vaults until final delivery. Rituals of politeness prevailed. Bowed offers, ceremonious pouring of green tea for rivals, and shared rice cakes commemorating large transactions. Yet beneath these courtesies swirled fierce competition. Merchant houses guarded privileged shipping routes, bribed river pilots for fastest passage, and covertly influenced grading officials to deem their rice premium quality. Social impacts and financial evolution. The Kawaramachi exchange reshaped Edo society. Rise of the Komeya rice merchant houses. Emerging families such as the Yasuda and Shibasawa began as commission agents but amassed capital through reinvestment of trading profits. By the 1650s, powerful Komeya extended credit to daimyos during poor harvests, effectively becoming quasi-bankers. They issued their own warehouse Resetsuokum sh tradable across markets in Osaka and Sakai, laying groundwork for Japan's later merchant banking conglomerates. Urbanization and class mobility. Access to rice credit allowed Chinin craftsmen to open new shops and studios. Wealth acquired through market speculation funded theater patronage in the Kabukiza and Edo's now iconic ukiyo-e prints depicting merchant life. Sumo wrestlers and geisha troops received rice stipends from municipal treasuries, diversifying Edo's cultural tapestry. Government regulation and price stability. Fearing inflation sparked by speculative hoarding, shogunate officials under the Komjire Edict 1689 capped maximum price at 100 mon copper coins per koku and mandated release of government-held reserves if market rates rose above threshold. These interventions smoothed price spikes but sometimes led to black markets in outlying canals. Environmental shocks and market resilience. So ceramic floating markets proved vulnerable to nature's whims. The Great Meraki Fire, 1657, when flames consumed 2/3 of Edo's wooden districts. Rice stocks stored in granaries along the riverbank were destroyed. The sudden demand surge sent spot prices spiking to 150 mon per koku. Despite shogunal decree, the market halted for 3 days as officials dispatched emergency shipments from Kai province. New safety regulations mandated brickland rice vaults and designated fire break canals by 1660. Floods in riverbank. Erosion. Typhoon season floods elevated the Sumida's level by over 2 meters. submerging docks and floating the funabashi into moored merchant junks. In response, merchants engineered adjustable gangplanks and built raised timber platforms, leak walkways, hoisted 10 vertical centimeters each year to maintain operations during swell. The shogunate sponsored annual dredging and planting of willow groves as natural embankments. Crop failures and famine precursor, a late frost in Hino in 1675 decimated that region's rice, prompting Kawaramachi to diversify barley and millet. Lots, traded on adjacent rafts, offered cheap substitutes for the poor. Barley sake brewers and tofu makers thrived, preventing mass starvation. The market's ability to integrate alternate grains would later influence Japan's rice tax policy under the Tokugawa Bakufu. Unresolved question as evening lanterns flicker across Kawaramachi's water and brokers tally the day's final ledgers. One wonders, could a market born of centralized shogunal oversight and fragile floating platforms withstand the disruptive tides of foreign trade treaties a century later? And how might this floating exchange evolve when steamships replace barges, and when Majira reforms dissolve the strict class and price controls that once defined Edo's rice economy? Meiji restoration and market liberalization. By 1868, shogun rule crumbled under pressure from domestic discontent and Western demands. The Meiji government swiftly dismantled many Tokugawa monopolies, including the shogunate's rice reserves and price controls. Kawaramachi's floating markets, long regulated by edicts capping koku prices, now faced a liberalized economy hungry for foreign exchange and industrial capital. Abolition of the Kom Jore Edict in Itenba by Tisha. The new imperial decree on rice-free trade repealed the 1689 price cap. Merchants celebrated unfettered bidding, but volatility surged. A single poor harvest triggered a 40% price jump. Subsequent bumper crops precipitated 30% drops. Former rice guilds, Zuhe Kumye, swiftly metamorphosed into joint stock rice exchange companies, issuing shares to investors eager to profit from speculation. Kawaramachi's floating rafts, once controlled by the shogunate's magistrate, now flew banners bearing company logos. Mitsui, Mitsubishi, Sumitomo entering rice trading as Japan's first modern corporations. Technological transformation of the wharf, steam barges and rail integration within 5 years. Steam-powered rice transports, initially imported from Britain, replaced riverboats. Paddle-wheelers with holes coated in tarage sake leaves to deter rot carried 500 koku per voyage, slashing travel times from 2 days to 8 hours. Simultaneously, the opening of the Tokaido Main Line in 1872 connected Edo, now Tokyo, to Nagoya and Kyoto. Kawaramachi's docks adapted. Elevated iron rails ran along quays, enabling direct transfer of rice from rail cars into watertight hold barges, using steam-driven hoists. Disappearance of Funabashi. By 1880, fixed floating platforms gave way to consolidated warehouses built on reclaimed land. Modern steel and concrete granaries equipped with pneumatic conveyors. Auction no longer required paddling between rafts, instead exchanged floors in glass. Poles lined with native cedar panels hosted bidding rings. Live ticker tapes spooling rice prices to wall-mounted brass indicators. Kawaramachi's name endured, but its riverside markets moved inland by a kilometer, reflecting Tokyo's rapid urban expansion. Social upheaval and commoditization consequences. Rise of the speculative rice tycoon, freed from shogunal price ceilings. Wealthy merchant families became power players. The Iwasaki family, founders of Mitsubishi, pioneered rice futures at Kuki-D, contracts at standardized delivery months ahead at a fixed price. They rented entire warehouses, leveraging brains and capital to corner rice stocks, briefly driving Tokyo's rice price to record highs in 1885. Public backlash spurred the Rice Speculation Prevention Act of 1886, reintroducing floor price minimums in trading. Position limits, early precursors to modern financial regulation. Rural discontent and migration. Farmers in southern Honshu, once guaranteed fair rates by shogunate inspectors, found themselves underpaid relative to urban auction prices, with lacking bargaining power. Many mounted protests on edicts posted on village notice boards demanded guaranteed minimum purchase prices. Unrest peaked in the late 1880s, leading to the first statewide rice riots of 1888. Government troops deployed to quell disturbances. Martial law declared in key prefectures in response. The Meiji Diet established a rural credit bank in 1890, offering low-interest loans to farmers, attempting to stabilize production and quell dissent. Cultural shifts in diet and consumption. Meanwhile, urban diets diversified. Western breads and noodles entered common parlance. Rice consumption per capita in Tokyo declined by 15% from 1870 to 1900, replaced by imported wheat and local barley blends. Sake breweries, once built along canals to access rice directly, repurposed facilities for soy sauce and mirin production, adapting to shifting demand. Kawaramachi's last sake license lapsed in 1905, marking the end of an era when floating rice markets underpinned an entire culinary and brewing culture. Modern regulatory framework and legacy. Formation of the Tokyo Grain Exchange in 1891. Tokyo's Chamber of Commerce chartered the Tokyo Grain Exchange, consolidating rice, wheat, and soy futures under one roof housed in a neoclassical hall near Yurakucho Station, while rice trading remained the marquee commodity. The exchange introduced digital calculating machines by 1925 to tabulate open interest and margin calls. Far from Ito's hand-tallied ledgers but echoing the same principles of transparent markets. Post-war transformations. After World War II, the occupation authorities restructured Japan's agricultural economy. They abolished speculator price controls, established the Agricultural Cooperative Federation (JA), and instituted government-guaranteed floor prices to protect small farmers. Rice futures trading was suspended in 1943, only resuming in 1999 under strict limits. Kawaramachi's site, now a riverside park beneath skyscrapers, retains a plaque commemorating its floating market origins. Reflection, commodities, and society. What they began as a shogunate-imposed floating exchange to stabilize grain supply evolved over 3 centuries into a modern financial system underpinning one of Asia's largest economies. Kawaramachi's story reveals how centralization versus liberalization, tight Tokugawa controls, ensured price stability but stifled innovation. Meiji liberalization fostered efficiency and growth at the cost of volatility and social unrest. Technological adoption, from Funabashi to steel-reinforced warehouses, from paddle steamers to rail networks. Each technological shift redefined logistical constraints and economic scale. Regulatory cycles, from early edicts to Meiji-era reforms, then post-war cooperatives and futures revival. Rice markets illustrate how governments react to speculation peaks and societal pressures. As you stroll along the modern Sumida waterfront amid gleaming restaurants and cherry blossom promenades, at the bronze statue of a rice boatman tipping his straw hat to passers-by in his stooped back and calm gaze lie echoes of Kawaramachi's floating platforms, of auctioneers tapping maibari, and of a society learning that rice is more than sustenance, is the pulse of governance, commerce, and community.